the edge of the universe, 400 men and women are probing the immeasurable blackness of space. Their leaders are an Earthman with no fear and a stranger with no heart. Travel beyond our time and solar system, into new galaxies, into worlds beyond your dreams. Star Trek, every week, in color on the NBC television network.
For those who remember, for those who will never forget, and for those who will experience the Star Trek adventure for the very first time. The Star Trek Hexology. Six timeless adventures that have changed Star Trek forever. Now, all 6 films remastered in glorious HD for the ultimate in sound and picture quality. This will be your last chance to own a physical copy of Star Trek. The Gene Roddenberry creation that launched the Star Trek franchise. The human adventure has just begun. For all generations. The original Star Trek films on sale one last time. What's going on, guys? Welcome to another Trekporial. I figure, today's first contact day, so you know what? I might as well do something special in this case. So I like to, I've been really trying to get people to watch Star Trek for several years, and it's pretty cool to see younger people, watching it for the first time. So with me on this channel, I want to welcome the one and only Golden Age Geek, straight from the UK. What's up, sir? How you doing?
Hello there. I'm glad to be back on to discuss some more good Star Trek.
So, last time we talked, I think we did 2 full streams talking about the stellar original series, especially season 1. And yes. It's probably the season I've watched the most, and I know you really enjoyed it yourself. So now we're going to be talking about so you're actually on TNG season 2 right now, aren't you?
I am.
Can I safely ask, what's the episode that you're currently on right now?
I just watched, and the name has just escaped me yet again. Let's see. I will have it with me in a few seconds. The Icarus Factor.
The Icarus Factor.
Yes.
And what was that one about? I think, didn't they have, that's a Riker episode, isn't it?
It is. His father comes aboard the ship, and Riker's just been presented with the opportunity of being captain of another ship, and of course there's a lot of tension between him and his father, so we see that sort of unravel. And you also have Worf, who he's very emotionally unstable, and the crew don't really know what that is about, but we find out a bit more about the Klingon culture. That's interesting. A lot of world building done there.
So you know, you want to hear a fun fact? You know who plays Riker's father?
Who?
The bad guy from Lethal Weapon, or one of them.
Oh,
Yeah,
hmm.
yeah. The actor's name is Mitchell Ryan.
I did
So
think he
yeah,
looked familiar.
yeah. So yeah, he was in that movie. He plays a detective, or he plays a cop in Magnum Force, which is the second Dirty Harry film. You know, Clint Eastwood. Um, and yeah, that's actually a great episode. I actually own that episode on VHS. My grandmother accidentally bought me episode 40 of The Next Generation, The Icarus Factor, instead of the episode I actually asked for Christmas, which was the Deadly Years episode 40 of the original series. But my grandmother kind of mixed them up. So, but you know, I watched that episode. You know, I actually really enjoyed it. I actually really enjoyed The Icarus Factor. It's a great Riker episode. So.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Sorry. The so I got so I wanted to talk a little bit about the rest of the original series. So I'm gonna skim upon that. So what are your overall or initial feelings on season 2? I know you said you didn't like it nearly as much as season 1.
Yeah, so season 1 of the original series, I think, is one of the best seasons of television I've ever seen. I think it was very concise. I think every episode, even the ones that I didn't think were as great, they were still, you know, of a pretty high quality. But season 2, going into it, there were certainly some episodes that I did like. You know, for example, the Doomsday Machine. I absolutely love that one. And then Mirror Mirror, of course, that's one that's always mentioned in fan circles, and the Deadly Years, which you just mentioned. I think that's the one where they go onto the planet and they get that virus that accelerates their aging. I think
That's
that's the
right.
one. I thought that was a very comedic episode. I loved, you know, Kirk gradually losing his hearing, and he's just like, "Wow, wow!" It's just absolute funny. I thought
I'll
it was a
say
very
this:
entertaining one.
Mr. Shatner was like he hated wearing that makeup, and
Oh, I
like
can
he's
imagine.
just like he was like, because there's this the one of the producers, his name is Bob Justman, and he's like, Bob Justman, get the fuck over, I'm gonna fuck you up and stuff like that. There's literally a moment, there's like a clip of him saying something similar, that's on YouTube or something, so it's hilarious. But he hated that experience. And Deadly Years, I don't know, I didn't really like it. I've only seen it a handful of times. I didn't really like it nearly as much as other episodes of season 2. I did like how the acting. I did like how did like the actor's interpretation of, you know, portraying the elderly and everything. But it just I don't know. It just felt like a little bit of a downer. And then you had this Commodore commanding the ship, and then they reused the Romulan bird of prey shots from Balance of Terror. So
Wow, they
like,
reused that.
yeah, and I was just like, a Commodore does never. I don't know how's the Commodore never have ever commanded the ship. So he's like,
Hmm.
he's in the series, he was a Starbase Commodore Stalker, I believe. So I kind of found that a little bit hard to believe too, but then again, that's just my opinion. So, but yeah, Deadly Years. But I have to ask you about the one and only. What do you think of The Trouble with Tribbles?
Oh, I absolutely love that one. I mean, you know that one. You know, it's another light-hearted one, but I thought it was really cool in my opinion. I can't really pinpoint exactly what it is, but again, there's just a lot of organic comedy in that just really resonates with me.
I liked how the running joke in that episode was everybody knew what this Quadro Triticale was except for Kirk. Like, Kirk has never heard of it. Everybody knows about it. Chekhov knows about it. Spock knows about it. People on the space station K7 know about it. So you had that. And then you just had the cute tribbles, you know, purring, and they're born pregnant. It's batshit crazy when you really think about it. But they're born pregnant, and then they just infest wherever they go, and they're mortal enemies of the Klingon Empire.
Yeah.
So how they got rid of the tribbles at the end of the episode was hilarious. Like, Scotty, you didn't beam them out of space. No, sir. They would be inhuman. Well, where'd they go? I gave them to the Klingon, sir. So that was a beautiful episode.
I also love the scene after the bar fight where Scotty goes, "Sir, can I tell you something? It's off the record, right?" "No, it's bloody well not off the record, Scotty." Because Scotty was the one who caused the fight.
Oh, I love it's like I love how the fight gets started. especially because you have the Klingon second in command basically saying it should the Enterprise. Like first they're making fun of Kirk, calling him Regulan Bloodworm and everything, and then they're like, then they talk about the Enterprise. And they talk about how the Enterprise should not be hauling garbage, and that gets Scotty's attention because he's the chief engineer. It's like it should be hauled away as garbage, and then he throws the first punch.
Absolutely, I loved all of that.
Sir, you hit the Klingons because they insulted the Enterprise, not because, well, sir, it was a matter of pride. I loved Trouble with Tribbles. Any other notable episodes?
I actually quite liked the Gamesters of Triskelion.
They're not called the Preservers. I forgot what they call them. The brains. The brains, the ones that control all the thralls. So, in that episode, they kidnap Kirk, Chekhov, and Uhura and force them to do gladiatorial games and everything.
Yeah.
I thought that. What'd you think of? So Kirk is being trained by the woman. I forget, Jana, or something, or I can't remember her name. I haven't seen that one in a long time.
Yeah, the name escapes me.
Shauna, maybe it's Shauna. I don't know. But they get like, I just liked how like it was really like they had those collars. So like the whole collar thing was around back then. And then, like, whenever the Galt, the master thrall, his eyes would shine, then the collars would get activated like that. So you didn't. The stakes were pretty high. The stakes were pretty high, and then you have these three brains that are basically running the whole show, and all they do is bet. They bet on this person with several Quatlus. They bet on that thrall several Quatlus. So.
And what I also liked about the episode is that there was a lot of sort of one-shot sequences where we see, William Shatner actually doing some sort of spins and flips, which I quite like, because in a lot of the earlier season 1 episodes, it's very obvious where the stunt doubles come in.
Yeah,
in a few scenes.
That's true, especially Space Seed.
Yes, especially that is the one. Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, that Triskelion was okay. What did you think of the alternate Earth? There was a big string of alternate Earth episodes. Like
they infuriated me.
So yeah, like you had the one with the Nazis, Patterns of Force. You had the one with the Romans, or 20th century Romans, which was very equivalent with their own televised gladiatorial games because TV, bread and circuses. I thought that one was actually pretty good. There was a piece of the action where some idiot leaves a book called Chicago's Mob of the 20s, and because of that, the prime directive, the planet is culturally contaminated, and so now like the government is basically a bunch of mobsters, trying to push their position onto someone else's turf, and they're always fighting over it. It's one of the wackiest episodes. And then you had one with the Yangs versus the Combs, or the capitalists versus the communists. Remember that one?
Yes, yeah, I remember that one.
That was Omega. That was the Omega Glory, and they brought back the actor from Dagger of the Mind, the one that played Dr. Van Gelder. They brought him back to play Captain Tracy, who was like the main villain of that episode.
Yes. Yeah, those string of episodes, I mean, I don't know what the general consensus is on these episodes, but they kind of infuriated me a bit because, I mean, with a sci-fi franchise like Star Trek, you do have to sort of, keep your realistic expectations at one side because, of course, you're going to see a lot of science fiction stuff. But we had like a string of episodes, and they were nearly like in a row. So you had like these 5 episodes in a row, and every episode would start with, Captain, we found another planet that is exactly the same as Earth. There's the same elements in the atmosphere, this and that. Humanity has got to this point, the same as on Earth, and it just escaped me that whole thing. And I mean, it's understandable in some of the episodes, like I forgot what it's called. Yeah, A Piece of the Action, where of course, they've had something left on their planet and then they've molded their society after it, or like Patterns of Force, where they've been influenced by someone who is a member of Starfleet. That's understandable. But these other episodes where coincidentally they've just evolved and have progressed exactly the same as humans, they've grown upon the same languages and the same symbolism, they've even got the same bloody constitution. I mean, it's just, I don't really see how that could be in any way possible. That this, by random chance, this planet could develop to be exactly the same as Earth, and we had like 3 of those. So
yeah. Just a way to save money, I guess.
And I mean, I think I read something after a lot of the time travel episodes in the first season. Gene Roddenberry said he didn't want to have a lot of time travel episodes in the future just to sort of preserve the timeline. So maybe that's their sort of way of getting around it. Of, oh, we won't just do a time travel episode. Instead, we'll just take a copy and paste of Earth. Perhaps that was their thought around it. But then at the end of season 2, you do actually have a time travel episode, which it just baffles me. But actually, getting to that Assignment Earth, I actually like that one, and I hear that not a lot of people did.
No, you're right. Not a lot of people. A lot of people think it's the worst episode of the series.
Oh God, no! 2 episodes that absolutely infuriate. They're like those alternate Earth episodes. You know, they have their problems, but most of them are good. I did like Patterns of Force and A Piece of the Action. I thought they were certainly the best out of those series of episodes. But the 2 that I think are just the worst are Cat Sport and The Apple. Those 2 no, get them out.
Okay.
I hated those.
All right. Yeah,
and they're just boring.
Yeah, the app, and what's funny is The Apple is the episode that really made like Star Trek extremely memeable, especially the concept of the red shirt. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
Yeah.
Like there were 4 deaths in that episode. One dude gets hit by a plant, by a plant that shoots little pellet or little stingers. And then there's one where a rock explodes, and then there's one where lightning kills somebody, and then there's one where the orange inhabitants have to they learn how to kill from Val, the computer that they worship as God, that controls the planet, and they just beat a red shirt to death, and it was the cheesiest thing ever. So that was where, like, so if you were in red shirt, you were security. Or if you were engineering and you went on a landing party mission with Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, you're screwed. Basically, you're dead. At least that's the rules of the original series.
Yeah. But
what did you think of? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go on.
All right. What did you think of The Changeling, episode 37?
The Changeling. I didn't mind that one.
That's the one with Nomad, the probe.
I thought certainly was an interesting episode. I loved how they sort of defeated it by sort of playing logic and manipulating it to sort of force it to, in a way, destroy itself.
That episode is very important because it provided they took that same concept and they expanded it quite a bit, and they made a motion picture out of it.
I've heard that a lot of changelings appear in Picard season 3, if I'm correct. Is it like
not the same changeling? See, they're referring to the probe as the changeling. Deep Space, the changelings that you're thinking of are actually from Deep Space Nine.
Okay, so they're totally different.
Yeah. So changeling in that regard refers to shapeshifter, and for Deep Space Nine and Picard.
Okay.
This probe, there's a different meaning for changeling. I forget why they call it changeling. Maybe because originally that probe Nomad was an American, was not American, was an Earth probe, and then it collides with an alien probe to become something different. So it changed its nature, it changed its programming, and it changed its form, and it learned to adapt. Maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
But that was another red shirt. That's another episode where Nomad is very, very dangerous. Like, you did not want to screw with that thing.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, that was a decent one. Season 2, I mean, is basically this, not as good as season 1, but definitely better than season 3 by far.
Yeah.
And let's get into season 3, sir. Anything to highlight from season 3?
Well, so the first episode I saw of season 3, I mean, when we did our talk of season 1, you mentioned that the sort of air date and the production date and the times they were aired were very different. But the first episode of season 3 that I saw was Spock's Brain, which I have to admit I fell asleep in the last 10 minutes. Yeah, I didn't like that one.
You didn't like Spock's Brain? All right. I'll tell you this. Spock's Brain was one of the first episodes I ever owned of the original series. I got that at the same time I got Space Seed on VHS, and I was a kid. I was 12 when I first saw that. And you know what? I thought it was when I was a kid. I thought it was pretty cool. I thought the whole idea. I mean, now I'm watching it, I laugh, especially when they, especially with some of the cringe dialogue when they talk to the men of the planet. They're like, what are you? Men. They're like, what? Men? Like yourself. Your words say nothing. Don't you have women? What women? You know. Oh, those that give pain and delight. Them. Yeah, them. And I didn't understand that. I didn't quite understand that when I was a kid, but now I think about it, the idea is so messed up. Women just kidnap them. They set booby traps so they can kidnap them and just screw them, basically. And then they have those little buttons that go, and then everybody goes into pain, or they get knocked out and everything. But yeah, they made fun of that in an episode of The Wonder Years when I was a kid. And what's funny is that I don't know if you ever heard, it's an old show from the late 80s, early 90s. Fred Savage was in it. They had the gym teacher was played by Robert Picardo, who plays the emergency medical hologram in Star Trek Voyager. So you got a little bit of Star Trek connection there. But yeah, like even Spock's Brain there was an episode where they made fun of that in the Wonder Years. So there's some cultural significance to that episode.
Okay, yeah, that episode, I still think I think after reading it's the lowest rated episode of Star Trek ever. I mean,
is it?
In my opinion, for good reason. I think it's got I think it's like 3.1 on IMDb or something. I think it is the lowest.
Okay.
But yeah. But
it's definitely not my least favorite of the series.
Yeah, I wouldn't say it's my least favorite. It is one of my least favorites though, but there are a few gems in season 3. One that I particularly loved was Spectre of the Gun. That one I do love. I think that is amazing.
The one where Kirk and Scotty and Spock and the rest of them, they're the Clanton gang. If you're familiar with Wyatt Earp and Tombstone, you'd be Ma Huckleberry. You know, no Val Kilmer in that episode though.
Yeah, I did like that one. I thought it was amazing. I loved the sort of setting. I loved everything about it.
Did you notice that it was an incomplete setting? Like it was because it was created the Melkoshan, the floating slimy head creature alien thing, basically recreated from Kirk's memories or something, and that's why it's an incomplete picture or an incomplete set, like an incomplete Western set, because
I did think that was interesting. Yeah, I did find it interesting how certain buildings were sort of cut in half, and the rest of the people still sort of saw it as complete. But of course, from our perspective, it all looks extremely off. And what makes it? Sorry, I was just going to say what makes it interesting as well is that although you can see this sort of vast landscape in this sort of desert, when they try and leave, they find out that they are essentially encompassed in a very small area, which just makes the tension just rise massively, because you can see your escape but you can't sort of get there. So I thought
they can't. There's like force fields everywhere, so they can't they can't leave the simulation or whatever it is. And they I like the idea that they had to, like, Spock had to really mind meld with all of them to really get them to fully understand that none of this is real. And that, if you think it's even real for a split hair, if you have any doubts about that, you can die, like Chekhov did. But then again, he didn't die at all. But that was to their understanding that he did die. And so when the the OK Corral thing comes up and they're all being shot at, the bullets never passed them because they were never there in the first place. So
yeah.
But yeah, the Spectre of the Gun was actually pretty good. That's also I do need to rewatch. One of my favorite clips is McCoy going into Doc Holliday's office and asking to borrow some of his chemicals so they can create like a tranquilizer. And like Doc Holliday's like, go on, take it. You're gonna die anyways. Go ahead. Just being very menacing. So you know how like everybody hails the Earps as like the heroes, they're the lawmen. But I like how they made them look like the villains in this particular episode. And one thing that I love to do when I introduce McCoy, or you introduce McCoy, one of my favorite clips is when DeForest Kelly's like, the name's McCoy. I'm a doctor. And everything. That's to me is like the perfect way to introduce McCoy if you wanted to create a clip about, focusing on Dr. McCoy. So but yeah, Spectre of the Gun's a great one. Another notable one that you liked?
Well, yeah, the last two that I think stood out for me. So Let That Be Your Last Battlefield. That's
yeah, that's a great one. That's a great one that really gets you thinking.
Yeah, and it was done well because it does present you with a good moral question and a good social question, but it doesn't push a biased message or create a one-sided approach. It very much shows how both sides to any sort of extreme can create a lot of eventually these two people who are the last from their planet, they are going to just battle it out and presumably die, and how it's going to just cause destruction. It shows how people who do choose to attack a certain group of people, obviously in the wrong, but then those who take it too far and then treat everyone else who's part of that group who oppressed them can also just continue on that hatred.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, basically what the episode was basically trying to tell the audience is if you pursue that type of deal or stuff like that is allowed to continue, it could be the end of everything. And especially in the 60s when, you still had the Cold War going on and you have the, US and the Soviets, at each other's, proverbial throats, with having, nukes above us, everything could get destroyed. So, and then you have the whole Israel-Palestine deal too. I hit them, they hit me. I hate them for this, they hate me for this. And the cycle goes on and on and on until there's nothing left. Either you stop it or there'll be nothing left. And that's kind of how I saw that episode. It's a very poignant thing to say. And Scotty's thing that he says that it's disgusting, that they're disgusting. And those two, Beale and Lokai. And Spock's like, I'm not sure that's accurate approach. And he's like, Mr. Spock, I've seen a lot of things. That is most certainly it. So, but yeah, that's a great episode. Anything else that you remember?
And then, what about that particular episode?
No.
Just any other episode. The Cloud Minders. I didn't mind that one.
That was that. So you had the Let That Be Your Last Battlefield was about more or less about racism. The Cloud Minders is about classism, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah, and it shows how the people at the top don't really appreciate the people at the bottom and what they do, and they don't really see them as essential in this society that they've built, even though, the people at the bottom are mostly doing all the manual work, whereas the people at the top are just enjoying the luxuries that have been brought to them.
Yeah, you have the so in this episode there was Cloud City, or in this case Stratos, well before Empire Strikes Back ever came out. I wonder if Empire Strikes Back kind of got some ideas from this, and of course Flash Gordon. But you had the Stratos people, up there, scholars, scholars and artists and intellectuals, scientists. And then you have the people on the ground, the miners, digging out the minerals, being exposed to this gas that makes them unstable, and not only unstable, but also makes them slow too, like when it comes to education. So the Stratos, sky dwellers believe that the the troglodytes, which I believe are the people on the surface, are inferior because of that. And they came to understand because of Kirk. Kirk was also influenced by this gas. Kirk, it was funny seeing Shatner portraying a very aggressive nature, and then he gets into a fight with Placis, the Stratos administrator. And I like the episode as like they basically hate each other by the time they hate each other by the time they leave. But they were able to resolve the episode and give the troglodytes what they needed, which was a safe way to not be exposed to the gas, so that they can take their place amongst people on that planet as equals, because they're not inferior. It was just ignorant. It's just, once again, ignorance, on the part of a lot of people, especially those in higher places. Government, for instance. So yeah, there you go. That's actually a really good season 3 episode. I think some of the acting could have been better in that episode, because I remember cringe. Like I remember cringing every time I hear the woman, the lead miner on the planet trying to talk. But then again, it was probably intentional because they were supposed to sound stupid in the first place. But yeah, that was a great episode. What did you think of the Tholian web?
I just have to familiarize myself.
That's the one where Kirk disappears, and then the Tholians, these weird looking people that looks like their heads look like helmets, and they're like in a really weird, very hot room. It was like a infrared, and they start weaving these filaments around the ship. I thought it was the coolest thing when I saw the box for the VHS for that. I thought it was the coolest looking thing, seeing the Enterprise being surrounded by these laser beams, basically.
Yeah, is this the one where Kirk goes onto the other ship and he becomes out of phase? Is this?
Yes, that is exactly what that episode is.
Yeah, I like this one, and there was also a nice character moment at the end. Obviously they all think that Kirk is dead, or they just have to presume that he's dead because they can't reach him anymore. And he leaves that message to Spock and McCoy, and he's talking to them not only as members of his crew, but also as friends. And obviously the running joke over the original series and in the films is that Spock and McCoy sort of have this sort of love-hate relationship that they do care for each other, but they do go on at each other from time to time. But ultimately Kirk tries to bring them together. He's always the one in the middle, sort of laughing at them and just how stupid their arguments are, and sort of bringing them together. So I like that as well. And I loved the reaffirming of the main trio. And I think I've gotten to Next Generation now, but I have to say that nothing beats Spock, McCoy, and Kirk. I think those three are just the gold standard for the trio in sort of any TV show that I've seen.
I agree. I totally agree. Like, just the chemistry alone is just, I mean, if they're I mean, you've seen Star Trek 5. If it was anyone other than those three having character moments, Star Trek 5 would have been complete garbage, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Had they had anyone else star in it. And a lot of people still hate Star Trek 5, but we'll get to that when we get to the movies. So but yeah, Foley and Webb had some great Spock and McCoy moments. I loved just how you got to see another ship go out of phase. Kirk is missing, and then as they're trapped on the outside, they can't leave. They're from the Tholians, and then there's shit going on inside. Like, people are losing their minds. The space being out of phase is screwing with people's brains. So in order for them to combat that, McCoy has to come up with an antidote. I don't know how he comes up with it, but he comes up with it, and he uses alcohol. It's basically alcohol and some derivative of some nerve gas used by the Klingons. So, and it's basically, it looks like orange juice. And you see, there's a lot of gifs of McCoy holding up that glass of orange juice. That's basically where that came from. It came from this particular episode. So. But Tholian Webb, I thought, was a great one. What did you think of the Enterprise incident?
The Enterprise incident.
That's the one where they go and steal a cloaking device.
Is this in season 3 or is this
It
in
is.
season 2?
Nope, it's in season 3.
Oh, here we go. Here we go. This one. So I believe at this point we'd already seen the Romulan leader, that the woman. I think we've already seen her in a previous episode. I like this one. Of course, you get to see Kirk disguising himself as a Romulan, and also, at the start we think that Kirk has sort of lost it because he's demanding that they go into the neutral zone and they're going to cross paths with the Romulans, and everyone's thinking, what the hell's wrong with him? And McCoy at one point is saying, should I relieve him from duty? Because of course, he just seems to be, going off his rocker. But we find out that it's all an elaborate plan to get onto the Romulan ship, and Spock, I think initially it started off as, a regular mission, but he sort of develops a sort of relationship with the Romulan leader in a sense. That was interesting to see.
Seeing Spock kind of screwing with her. He's just he's going along with her, pretending to show interest and everything, and how that all ultimately plays out. I believe this might be the first time we see Romulan ale in this series, to be honest, because Romulan ale is blue, and they're drinking blue. Her and Spock are drinking blue stuff. So I think that's Romulan ale.
I do have a question about this particular episode, because they make a sort of big point that the Enterprise has got this cloaking device and they're going to use it against the Romulans. But does that plot point ever sort of come back? Because I don't really think it's sort of brought up in any of the movies that the Starfleet have actually utilized it for anything.
There's an episode of TNG season 7. It's called the Pegasus, and it really goes into why Starfleet does not use cloaking devices.
Right.
So there's like a treaty, or there's some sort of treaty that's in place or something for that. So, but yeah, there's that. So you'll find out down the line.
Okay.
Without giving away any spoilers. So, but yeah, the reason why they went for this particular cloaking device. Back in Balance of Terror, they were still able to track the Romulan ship. They just couldn't see them. So, in this case with the Romulans, the sensors don't pick up the ship even when the ship is cloaked. So that was why they did what they did. That's why they went in and got the cloaking device, so that they can understand how it works and how to counteract that.
Right. Okay.
So that was the big deal. And Spock goes into it completely when he gets arrested by the Romulan commander, and he basically states that in his I forget what they call where it's his statement as he's being arrested. So, but yeah, Enterprise Incident was great acting, great everything. It was a fun episode. Episodes I did not like in the children's show league. That was one with the kids.
Oh yeah.
Boom, boom, boom. And then some stupid shit like that. And then you had the Gorgon dude who was controlling the kids. It was just a weird episode. I don't know. Kids in Star Trek aren't the kids in the original Star Trek aren't the best. Like Mary had that problem too, and Mary was probably the first episode that had the alternate Earth thing, where they actually they say this is an alternate Earth and everything.
Yeah.
Bonk bonk on the head just doesn't work for me. But that's that. What do you think of the finale? What do you think of the Abe Lincoln episode?
Yeah, that one was a strange one. I don't really know how to feel about that one.
That was the one where they go. There's this molten planet. This molten planet creates this little environment for humans to basically. They put on a play. They wanted to understand the nature of good versus evil. So they created, meat puppets of Abe Lincoln and Serac, who we learn so this episode has world building. We learn more about Vulcan culture and where the whole idea, the philosophy of practicing logic comes from. It comes from this character named Serac. And then we learn quite a bit about the villains of this universe, especially one that's going to be pretty important, that's talked about all the time, and that's Kahless, the Klingon. In this episode, they reveal Kahless as a tyrant, but in other episodes, later episodes, especially of TNG, where they really fundamentally changed Klingons to be more of a warrior race than a tyrannical race, which is how they were depicted in the original series. So this Kahless is evil in that episode. Compared to, we do meet another version of Kahless in the Next Generation.
Oh, okay. Well, that'd be interesting. Yeah, I like the overall message of that particular episode. It was just another, bombastic one that, on paper is kind of a bit weird, but I don't have any problems with that one in particular.
Let's just say Colonel Green gets mentioned again in Enterprise. I'll say that. I'll just go ahead and say that. So, very, very important to the history of the future, if you get what I mean. So he was a 21st century tyrant, human tyrant that I think he caused World War III, if I remember correctly, or maybe he was a byproduct of that. I forget. But yeah, so Savage Kern was fun. What about the Space Hippies one? Way to Eden.
Oh no, I don't think I like that one.
Herbert.
No, I didn't like that one at all. I don't think
they were all barefoot. They were barefoot and they were playing playing rock music in the lounge or in the galley.
Yeah, I didn't like it. Just the look of these people just absolutely irritated me. Like, one of them's got like a massive lumpy ear. I was like, what? And the other one has like the weirdest hairline I've ever seen in my life. It was so weird. That was just it felt literally like the one with the kids, but instead of kids, they just replaced them with adults.
Yeah, it was originally supposed to have. So that episode was originally supposed to have McCoy's daughter be one of the space hippies, but they changed it to someone Chekhov used to, date.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, originally McCoy originally was divorced. He had a daughter, and that's why he went to the the service and became a doctor and everything, and went on adventures with Kirk and Spock. So, I mean, that was so that's one thing I liked about the 2009 film is that they do say like, oh, where the name Bones came from was that I had nothing left but my bones and everything. And that's where the name Bones came from. I actually kind of like that.
I also heard I did when I was actually looking up where the nickname Bones came from. I did see that in relation to the 2009 Star Trek film, but apparently back in like World War II or something, they did have a name for sort of medical officers in the war. They called them Bones. It was something to do with that apparently. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean, Mr. Ronberry served in the war. A lot of those guys that worked on the production of Star Trek served in World War II.
Yeah, the actor who plays Scott, I didn't really notice it, but apparently in a few episodes, because he lost one of his fingers. So apparently,
James Doohan.
Yeah, apparently you can see in certain shots like his.
Yeah, you can see like he's holding the tribbles. He's holding like a bundle. He's holding a bunch of tribbles, and you can see his hand because they really tried really hard not to show the hand that is missing the finger.
Yeah,
and he was actually in D-Day. Like he got shot at. He was in combat, and his finger got shot off basically.
God.
Yeah. So whenever I see Scotty being based, I think that to me that's just James Doohan being super duper based. Like I just see I learning that and seeing him, especially him in Taste of Armageddon, where he's talking up to the ambassador who's trying to tell him to lower the shields. He's like, "No, sir, I will not." I mean, it just makes it brings out the fangirl in me, even though I'm not a fangirl, but still. In a very similar moment with Kirk and Court Martial, I like having those types of moments, based moments, where the actors, and you're just like, ooh, you want to get behind them. They're awesome and everything, and be like them. So, but yeah, what were we talking about?
We're talking about
The Way to Eden.
Yes.
I know there's. Were there any other episodes that you wanted to talk about before we move on to continues?
No, not really. Season 2 and 3, as I say, there are some good ones in there, but I think we've talked about most of them.
What do you think of the finale for Star Trek, especially the episode with Dr. Lester? And they switch bodies. Her and Kirk switch bodies. She's jealous of Kirk because women are not usually accepted as Starfleet captains. So like there's no Starfleet captains for women and everything.
I don't know what to think about that one. I think, obviously, what I know is that they were going to originally have 5 seasons, I believe, to sort of match the 5-year mission, but obviously that got cut short. So at the time when they were filming it, I assume they didn't know that this was going to be the last episode. I feel like if they did, they would have made it a much sort of more grand finale, more worthy of, being a Star Trek finale.
Yeah, I don't think they I don't know if it was meant. I mean, they didn't really back in the 60s. They didn't really do finales the way they did later on, especially in the 90s. So like when shows just ended, they just ended. Like they never really had most shows were episodic, so and didn't really follow like particular arcs. Every episode was its own unique, self-contained story. So usually an episode was just TV series would just end with another self-contained episode talking about whatever. So Turnabout Intruder, the finale, was basically just, I mean, they knew it was coming to an end. Like season 3, Season 3 was put on the NBC Def slot, 10 p.m. I think it was 10 p.m. Eastern on Friday nights. Who the hell? I mean, especially in the late 60s, who's going to stay home on a Friday night to watch Star Trek, especially late on a Friday night? People go out drinking or they go out, hanging out with people or, spending it, doing other things. So that didn't work. And like season 2, what happened was at the end of season 2 was they were going to cancel it after season 2. The reason why a season 3 even existed was because of a massive letter campaign that Roddenberry instigated, and he got a lady named Bijo Trimble to help him, bring the word out. So they started a letter writing campaign, and NBC got so much fan letters telling to redo to renew the series, and they did. But they just they set up to fail ultimately.
Yeah.
And if they would have done a season 4, I think it would have continued to spiral in a less quality of a direction. So it might not be the most popular thing to say, but I think maybe this was a good point to end it.
Yeah.
I mean, season 2 went down in quality. Season 3 went down in quality, and they brought back a lot of the same writers, but it was a lot of the ideas that they didn't use in season 1 that they ended up using in the later seasons that weren't as good. And I feel the music, they did reuse a lot of the music from season 1. They got a lot of the composers back: Steiner, Courage, Freed, Kaplan. They brought all of them back, but the music didn't feel nearly as impactful, or as it got cheesier with the way it sounded. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I did notice that.
So I don't know if it was because of the equipment that they had, but it didn't sound as orchestral as season 1 did, or as tense. Like season 1, there was a tension. There was lightheartedness, especially in the Shore Leave composer Mullendor's episodes. But the stuff that Steiner did was very tense. So like episodes like Balance of Terror, the Romulan theme, or Charlie X, or Corbin Might Maneuver, like stuff that's just seemed bombastically crazy and like you think shit's gonna hit the fan. That's the type of music that Steiner was known for, and there was a lot of tension in his themes, which is something I really liked. And I didn't feel that as much in season 2. Season 2, even episodes like the Doomsday Machine, which should have had a lot of tension. I mean, it was still a very tense episode. It's just, I think the music was just that came off as very bombastic. Ba, 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 ba. That's the Doomsday Machine music, pretty much.
Yeah,
And I might be in the minority on this one.
no, I do agree with that, and also with the intro sequence. I'm a big fan of the season 1 intro, but when you get into 2 and 3, where they have the singing backtrack, I wasn't a big fan of that, and the intro itself seems very rushed.
Yeah, season 2 was like a combination of the choir, or like the voice and like synthesizers, and it didn't sound good when I first heard it. When I owned the VHS of season 2, I think it was during the Babel. That was the one I owned. That was another great season 2 episode. The season 3 was all, I think, the voice, the lady's voice. I forget the lady's name that sang it, with minimal music. And I think that season 3's one was better. And plus, they changed the color of the font. In the first 2 seasons, the font was yellow, and then season 3 they made it blue.
Yeah.
So, and season 2 and 3 they added DeForest Kelly in the opening. So in the first season, they only had Shatner and Nimoy as the stars of the show, and then they had DeForest Kelly for seasons 2 and 3. So apparently, and I was told this, season 4 would have added James Doohan to the opening credits as well if they did a season 4. I mean, Scotty is the other. He's the 4th senior officer. I mean, those 4 are the senior officers of the ship.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, I'm happy that DeForest Kelly got added to the intro. It's just, certain bits, as you were saying with the music, it does feel a bit off in places.
What did you think of? Continues? Because I know I'm the one that recommended Continues, and as far as I'm concerned, Continues is a true continuation of the original series.
Yeah, in my head, it is also canon as well. That's what I think.
Okay, so you did like it. All right, I really thought I really thought it was extremely faithful, and it was one project that was done with so much love. It's hard to not notice that.
Yeah, it's weird because I can tell that it was made, well, recently. When I say recently, I know it wasn't made a few years ago, whatever, but it was made, relatively recently. But the way that they filmed it and the way that the production was sort of set up, I truly believe that this is a continuation from the original series, because it looks like they've just took it out of time. They literally just grabbed it from the 60s and they just plopped it into today and they just carried on. And that was absolutely phenomenal.
And it felt, I mean, the most important was it felt like you were watching a continuation. Like the acting, like you have Vic Mignogna's Kirk and Todd Haberkorn's Spock, and I think they really sold it. Like if there's anyone that did a really good Spock, the best Spock other than Nimoy, it would be Todd Haberkorn. I know people might not agree with that, but I had no issues with his performance. He still managed to pull off Nimoy pretty well, even though he doesn't look anything like Nimoy. But he still managed to capture what that gravitas that Spock had in the original Leonard Nimoy Spock in particular. So episodes, I don't remember all the episodes. I've only seen it twice, I believe. There were 11 episodes. I know it opens with an episode where they brought back Michael Forrest to play Apollo again. What'd you think of? I actually like this episode more than the original episode he was in, Who Mourns for Adonis, which was season 2.
I wouldn't say that I prefer this one. I still think I prefer the original series one. However, I thought it was really good. This, as I was saying with season 1 of Star Trek, the original series, that was very consistent in quality, and so was this as well. I absolutely loved Star Trek Continues, and how, they did carry on those stories that were, obviously if they did a season 4 and 5, they would have picked up on some original story ideas or carried on from stories that had started in the first 3 seasons. And I think that they did a really good job in concluding what the original writers would have planned out.
Oh, they would definitely not have done that. That's a more modern trope with that really started with TNG with having season long arcs and then following up on stuff established in earlier seasons. Original series, most 60 shows were completely episodic. There was only once or twice where they actually referenced another episode, because they wanted people. Television back then wanted people to just tune in and just be into the episode. They didn't want stuff serialized. They didn't even want things to have arcs, like story arcs. So every episode was its own thing.
But I suppose in a way that adds more credit to the Star Trek Continues writers, because what they did is they carried it on where it wasn't supposed to be carried on, and they still made it work.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. The fact that Continues, even though TO original series was obviously the main, inspiration for it. I think there's a lot of TNG, DS9, Voyager, and Enterprise also mixed in with this. And there's actually Easter eggs of stuff that are referenced in TNG. And heck, they even put an Easter egg for Discovery, believe it or not. So, might not sit well for some people, but whatever. I loved how they had the series finale.
Yes, I love
the series finale. Took me by surprise, but then I thought about it and it made sense, because, and once again, like, how do you do a good series? What's a great way to do a series finale? You go back to where it all began, and TNG did that. You're going to see that pretty soon. Voyager did not do that. DS9 kind of did that. This series really did that. And I loved how they went back to not the first pilot, but the second pilot. The first time we see Kirk, and we get to see the Espers again, the silver-eyed, very dangerous people. But instead of one bad Esper, well, two technically, but only one of them was bad, Gary Mitchell, in Where No Man Has Gone Before. Now you have a whole ship full of these Espers. And I forget what the name of the ship is that they command, but it was crazy, like how outclassed they were, because you had all those Espers on board, and they were getting more and more and more and more and more powerful by the minute. It was like an exponential curve as time goes on.
Yeah. And also one thing I did like is the woman who was leading the alien race was played by Nicola Bryant, who is a sixth Doctor companion in Doctor Who. I very much appreciate that. I was like, oh, I know you.
Oh, and speaking of doctors, the Sixth Doctor himself was in an episode.
He was, yeah.
Alan Baker.
He was. That was a big surprise. But yeah, I absolutely loved the ending, and of course, I watched the original series, and then I watched Star Trek Continues, so it very much gave a nice gateway for me to go into the movies, because of course it ends and then motion picture picks up, and yeah, it worked so well for me. And obviously, someone who had, like yourself, who had seen the films, and then years later when this came out, you watched this, it must have been like a puzzle coming together nicely. In a way.
Oh, it was something that I always wondered about for years. Like, how would the original series have ended? And Vic has his own issues. He had his own issues with being canceled and everything. But this was I think what Vic gave us was absolutely beautiful, and absolutely, and I will recommend this as long as I'm a Star Trek fan. I will recommend this to anyone new watching that, to watch alongside the original series, and and then the movies, because I just feel like it like there was a lot of love. They put a lot of thought into what they were doing, and they wanted it to work, and it does. It works very well. And it had such a beautiful ending. I love the speech, and then you have Vic is in the Admiral's outfit from Motion Picture, and they're a character. They introduced the character in this series that unfortunately the reason why we don't see her again after this is well you gotta watch the series to find out. And then they brought back another character, Yeoman Smith, who is the yeoman in Where No Man Has Gone Before, and they gave her an arc, and they gave her a great moment in the finale. I won't say what it was because I mean I want you guys to watch it, but it was I was surprised. I was surprised with what I saw, and it was I was so happy after seeing that, and that this came out. I think the first episode was dropped in 2013, and I think it finally ended in 2018 or 2019, and it was because CBS was cracking down on fan projects, Star Trek fan projects, because of Axanar, which was worked on by Robert Meyer Burnett. Alec Peters was running the project, and a bunch of other people were involved. And it got so much money to the point where CBS put the kibosh on that.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think they came out with something ultimately, but they did not. They came out with something ultimately, but they just didn't. They didn't. They were originally supposed to make like a series of movies, I think, and they couldn't do it. They had to release. They were only allowed to release a couple of episodes, 20 minutes at the longest. There's some weird settlement that they did. I don't know, but that was Axanar. So Continues kind of had to get cut short. That's why they only did. I think they originally were going to do more episodes, but they had to cut it off. So they did a finale, and that was it. And then, unfortunately, what happened to Vic happened. So, but yeah, that was Star Trek Continues. Now we're in the motion picture now. What do you think of that movie?
This is one that, there are people on both sides. Some people think that this is, the greatest Star Trek film, and they'll stand firm in that belief. But other people think it's not really that great. I can see both sides. I can see both viewpoints in regards to the motion picture. I think the first hour, up until the bit where the Enterprise sets off again for the first time in that movie, I think that is near perfection. I love that. Of course, and I've heard one big criticism of the motion picture is the pacing, and that is very slow in some places, and I can see that because we have like I don't know how long it is, but it's around about like 5 minutes from when Kirk and Scotty get into that shuttle, and then you go around the Enterprise, and it goes in. And at first, I love the music, by the way. The music
is
amazing.
Beautiful.
That is enchanting. If any word I'm going to use is enchanting. But after a while, you think, right, okay, are you going to end? No, you're going to keep going. Okay,
you're going to keep going. You're going to see the ship porn. You're going to experience the ship porn from all angles.
Yeah. So yeah, that did bug me, by the end of that scene, but I still liked that very much. And as I say, the music was just absolutely phenomenal. And of course, now that I'm on the Next Generation, they reuse. Is his name Jerry Goldstein?
Jerry Goldsmith.
They reuse his original track in the intro for that. I love that. That is the definitive Star Trek theme to me.
Even more than the original series theme?
In some places, yes. I would say.
I might agree with you on that. I love that motion picture theme. And I'll say this about the motion picture. Motion picture is the only film that was produced by Gene Roddenberry that had his original idea. What's Star Trek about? Well, Star Trek's about exploring strange new worlds, seeking out new life and new civilizations. Well, this movie actually had that. The rest of the movies, not quite. The rest of the movies were kind of, typical movies that had, villains, antagonists, or problems that they needed to solve. This movie had all that. This movie had an antagonist, V'ger. This movie had a lot of world building. You had the Klingons in the beginning. You have these excellent shots of the Klingon ships. You have that excellent Klingon theme, which is reused to death as Worf's theme in Next Generation. I don't know if you've noticed, but that Klingon thing, dun 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 dun. They play that a lot in later shows, and that's pretty much become the Klingon theme ultimately, because the Klingons didn't have a theme in the original series, like the Romulans. The Romulans had a theme, very foreboding theme, but Klingons just had this, but it was just about it was about a probe that wanted to merge with its master or merge with its creator. And it was Roddenberry's way of talking about the human condition of how man wants to know God, basically.
Yeah.
Or our notion of God. And it gets really deep at certain points. And when there is dialogue, it's very impactful. It's very, this is the most highbrow Star Trek movie. And it's something that critics didn't get. So critics didn't understand this. Just like The Cage, critics and studio executives didn't quite understand this. But because of how successful Star Wars was, Star Trek: The Motion Picture got an insane budget. And that's the second highest budget, I believe, in the 70s. The only movie that had a higher budget than motion picture was Superman.
Oh.
Even Star Wars only had a third of the budget that this movie did. I mean, this movie, Star Trek Motion Picture, made $45 million, or it cost $45 million. Motion Picture made a lot of money back, though. Made almost $100 million back then. Like, a lot of people went to see this movie. Like, that's how much an event this was. But the thing was, after Motion Picture came out, and the thing was, Motion Picture, the effects were not complete. So
yeah, that's one thing I heard. Yeah,
and because of that, it wasn't really followed up on for a couple of decades. And then when they decided to make another cut of it with completed effects, they came out with the director's edition, and there's additional scenes. And to me, that's the definitive version to watch. And that just came out. It's part of the 4K, and it's also part of the new Blu-ray release. So the fact that they did that, I'm curious. And that was all done with early 2000 or late 90s, early 2000 video stuff. So they had to really recreate everything from scratch. And there's a reason why DS9 and Voyager have not come out on Blu-ray yet, is because they had to recreate everything like they did with the TNG Blu-rays. Like, everything was done, all the visuals were done on video and not on film. So they had to recreate everything, like the effects and all that. And it costs a lot of money and time. So, but hey, if they ever did like a Kickstarter or something, I would support it on the fly. I'd probably put a lot of money into it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's the motion picture. Motion picture put me to sleep the first few times I watched it. So
I've heard that there are a lot of similarities between that and 2001: A Space Odyssey.
Yeah, there's that's one thing. 2001 is way more out there than motion picture. Motion picture actually has dialogue. 2001 has very minimal dialogue, like minimal. Like, you don't hear any dialogue until like 15 minutes into the movie.
Oh,
yeah. So
I actually haven't seen that film. I will have to at some point.
Yeah, well, that's my next. So I'm working on one retrospective now. That's gonna be my next one after that. So yeah, so be ready for 2001. I'm gonna try and get these done soon. So, so I'm shameless plug.
Just to finalize my thoughts on the motion picture, I think, as I said, the first hour I think is near perfection. But afterwards, I mean, look, I understand, what Star Trek is about. I understand, the fundamentals of Star Trek. I'm not saying that what I would have preferred is for it to be like a big action set piece with like big gun battles and spaceship battles and this and that. But I feel, again, the pacing, I feel it was very slow in some places. And that did make me kind of bored with it. So going into the last act of the film, I did feel incredibly bored. So that kind of took the film, down for me. So but I don't by any means hate it. I don't. I still think it's a phenomenal film. However, I would say it's my how do I say this? It's not my least favorite. It's like one above that. I think you already know what my least favorite's going to be, because I think that's, I think it's a universal opinion what people's least favorite is out of these 6 movies. But,
Yeah.
yeah. I will have to say that I do prefer the other ones, in comparison to the motion picture. Now, I may be the villain when I say that, but that's just how it is.
The motion picture feels like it feels very, even though it's part of the original 6, movies, the motion picture just feels like totally isolated from the other 5.
It does, yeah. Because the
That's
other ones
why,
they feel like one big story. Like where one ends, the next one picks up.
yeah. So motion picture, it doesn't really have that. Motion picture was originally supposed to be a pilot of a series called Phase 2.
Yeah,
and that was originally going to have new characters. Ilea was going to be one. Decker, or Kirk would have a different first officer, and then Nimoy would not have returned to Spock, and they would have gotten another character. They created another Vulcan science officer, and his name was Science Officer Zahn. XON is his name. Full Vulcan. And he was originally supposed to be played by David Gautreaux, who played the captain or the commander of the Epsilon 9 station that was destroyed in the beginning of the movie. That actor who was telling the Enterprise about the threat of V'ger, he was originally going to be like they did, like there's footage of him doing test screenings with the Vulcaneers and all that. He would have played Zahn. So. But yeah, there were some scary elements in motion picture. You had the transporter accident, which was the first time we ever seen something like that. And the sound, I mean, the sound just like it grates my nerves just thinking about it.
Yeah, the fact that someone could materialize wrong, they wouldn't go right, and there's that line that said afterwards that sir. When Kirk talks to the place where these people were being transported from, and they say, "Sir, whatever came back didn't survive that long. Luckily, like it was actually a blessing that they got killed before they could suffer all that pain, because they would have been pieced back together just incorrectly."
Yeah, and it's crazy. Like it's just like you can only imagine what they came back as, and that was supposed to be the science officer that Kirk wanted in the beginning, that he was talking to when he got off the off the train at Starfleet. That was him that got killed on the surface. And what's funny was Yeoman Rand is the transporter chief, and she's like, oh my god, they're forming, and you're just like, you're thinking, what is going on here? So but yeah, that was a scary scene. There's another scary scene when the V'ger probe first enters the ship. Now, there's not a really, in the theatrical version, I'm sure you've seen it, it's not a very good transition. It just kind of happens out of the blue. The director's cut has a better transition, where I think you see like a beam or an electrical orb ball hit the bridge, and then you see the line, the shiny electrical line, probe line, and then it's moving around, and it's trying to take the ship's data, and then Spock hits it, and then it zaps Spock, and then it just completely vaporizes Lieutenant Ilea, and it kills her. It kills her. Like what comes back is not her. It's a probe or a mechanism, a unit. And then, it has her memories. So Decker is trying, because Decker is basically Riker and Ilea is basically Troy. In this case, that's where they got those characters. That's where those characters came from in TNG. So Decker had a love affair with Ilea beforehand, even though she's a Deltan, they're known for their celibacy. He's trying to get her the probe version of her to remember, and I think ultimately she does, and then they merge together with V'ger, and that's how that's what V'ger ultimately wants to evolve. It's a weird ending, but it's a very Star Trek. It's a very Mr. Roddenberry type of ending. And I like how the movie ends with, and the adventure has just begun, everything. And then it goes into Wrath of Khan, which Wrath of Khan feels like a new beginning. Like it feels like you're once again reintroducing the crew to everybody, especially Admiral Kirk.
Yeah, I think that the Wrath of Khan sort of explored the idea that Kirk is an older guy now. He isn't as young as he used to be. I think it did it a bit better than the motion picture, in my opinion. I do like that scene on the Enterprise where Khan is communicating with them and Kirk is sort of running around the ship, looking at the controls, and then he just has to stop and get out his glasses because he can't see a
Damn.
thing.
Khan, how do I know you'll keep your word? Oh, I've given you no word to keep, Admiral. In my opinion, you simply have no alternative. I have that entire scene memorized. Oh, Khan's or Ricardo Montalban's performance as Khan is just like it's how I don't even know how to describe it. It's like he is just so unforgettable. Like that is when you have a great performance, you have to have a character who is unforgettable. His character is like just from his dialogue alone is unforgettable, and he's quoting freaking Moby Dick the whole time, most of the time. Right? Like he's like, I don't know you, but I never forget to face Mr. Chekhov, isn't it? And that was the funny thing was I'm seeing this. I'm watching Space. I saw Space Seed after I saw Wrath of Khan for the first time. Well, that I remembered. And you realize Chekhov is not in Space Seed because Space Seed was a season 1 episode. Chekhov doesn't appear until season 2.
But
so
what do you think about that? Because I thought, like, some people have, in certain forums, they've said, oh, Chekhov was there, you just didn't see him. But I think in one of the season 2 episodes of the original series, Chekhov mentions that he only started serving on the Enterprise after season 2, obviously began in universe. So what do you think about that? Does it make sense, or is it just something that we have to look over?
I think fans have looked this over and have basically come to the conclusion that he was on the ship, and like there's been a book written about there's been books written I forget which book it was. I don't know if it was Eugenics Wars or if it was Terrain in Hell, but there was a 3-book series written. I forget who wrote it, but it was about Khan's backstory on Earth and how he, was, Khan Noonien Singh, how he took over, several, quarters of Asia and the Middle East and all that. That was a 2-parter. And then there was the 3rd book, which was Terrain in Hell, which was, him ruling on Ceti Alpha 5 and what happened in between. And what's funny was, going back to, despite my disappointment with Picard season 3, going back to Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett, he actually did a stream a couple years ago where he got a hold of the script for a Khan series that was being developed by Nicholas Meyer. If you don't know, Nicholas Meyer directed The Wrath of Khan. And Nicholas Meyer came up with a Khan series which would take place in between Space Seed and The Wrath of Khan. And so it would explain what happened to Marla McGivers, the redhead that, betrayed the Enterprise and went with Khan on Ceti Alpha 5. What happened to her? Why was she not in The Wrath of Khan? I don't remember what the exact reason was, but I think she started getting sick. The actress Madeline Rue, who played Marla in Space Seed, got really sick. She started getting multiple sclerosis. So I don't know if that was the reason why she wasn't in the movie. And then they just, when they refer to the death of his wife, I always assume that they're talking about her.
Yeah,
I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah, that's what I assumed. That's who they were talking about.
So we kind of understand that she was like the first in this Khan series. She was the first victim of the Ceti eels. The eels that Khan puts into, Captain Terrell and Chekhov. Chekhov's his first officer. What did you think of them including? Because early '80s there was a lot of horror movies. Slasher films were still pretty big in the early '80s. And
I
then
think I know what you're getting at here.
you had a bit. There was a lot of body horror to your David Cronenberg films, and so you get a little bit of this body horror stuff from Wrath of Khan when the eel goes into the goes into the ears. It's one of the scariest moments in movies, and you're just like, oh my god.
Yeah, well, what I thought you were going to mention is the fact that when they filmed it, they actually had a child part of Khan's crew that was not going to be explained. And actually, in one of the scenes where his captain is sort of bent down, and then Chekhov says, "Sir, we need to go," like that's where the child was, and they kept that scene in. They just sort of cropped him out. I thought that's what you were going to mention. Are you familiar with that?
I am not actually. I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, well, that's strange. That's strange. So apparently originally in The Wrath of Khan, when they filmed it, there were multiple scenes where a child was part of Khan's crew, and this child is not explained whatsoever. He just appears every now and then. He's sort of like a ghostly figure. And they decided to just remove all the scenes featuring this child, but they kept one in where they go into that little base on the planet, and when Chekhov says to his captain, "Sir, we need to go," you'll find, well, if you watch that scene, you'll find that his captain is actually sort of bent down on the floor, and what he was actually doing was talking to this child, but they sort of cropped it out so you don't see the child, but they kept this scene in the film.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
At all. Interesting. Okay. All right. So when Chekhov goes, Botany Bay. Oh no, we got to get out of here. Damn. Okay. You're talking about that scene, right?
Yeah.
All right. Okay. All right. I'll have to watch that again. I didn't know that. That's interesting. I'll have to read into that. Yeah. Apparently, I mean, there's been assumptions. There's been theories that his first officer, Joachim, might be a son of Khan. The way he embraced him when he died and all that. I mean, there's a lot of theories. I loved. Did you like? What do you think of Savick?
Savick is the female Vulcan, right? Correct?
Yes.
Correct.
Correct.
I thought she was an interesting character, but there were some points where I mean, of course, I had to pick up on the fact that she was Vulcan, but she comes across as more sort of human-like than, let's say, Spock, because you see her sort of running around the Enterprise, like, "Sir, keep the turbo lift open. Sir, keep it open." And I feel like someone like Spock would be more sort of reserved when it comes to that. So I think she's not she doesn't seem as Vulcan as we come to expect from, let's say, the likes of Spock. But I mean, I thought she was an interesting character. Of course, she gets recast in the third movie, and
Kirstie Alley wanted too much money. That's why she wasn't in the third one. That's why they had to recast her. So
I think I'd still say I prefer the Savick that we got in the Wrath of Khan, though.
Yeah, you and a lot of people. I think I agree too. I like both actresses though. Yeah, I think I would have preferred they kept Kirstie Alley. I can only imagine how Kirstie Alley's would have her response would have been to what eventually happens in 3. Especially, I know you know what moment I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So
and I'm not trying to divert too much, but in the Undiscovered Country, they also have a female Vulcan. I'm correct. It is a Vulcan.
Polaris. They were originally going to use Savick.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it was Nicholas Meyer who was against the idea, because Nicholas Meyer directed 6, but they originally were going to have Savick be be that character.
Well, what I was saying with in Savick in the Wrath of Khan is she doesn't really seem as cold and calculating as the other Vulcans are, and then when you get into the Search for Spock, Savick seems even less Vulcan. But then when you get to number 6, that is when it was actually said through dialogue that this character is a Vulcan. I thought, wait a minute, that doesn't seem right, because she doesn't really act as we've come to see other Vulcans act. Like, as I say, with the balance between emotion and logic, she's very much on the side of emotion more than logic, or the way that the character's portrayed, it very much gives off that impression. That's just what I
Oh,
thought anyway.
interesting. I don't know. I didn't really spot a whole lot of emotion out of Valeris until until Spock was melding with her, and then she started screaming in pain and all that. During that interrogation, and heck, even Robin Curtis, who played Savick in 3, I felt she pretty much delivered I mean, there was a little emotion, but not too much. Even when she says a certain character is gone, which we'll get to. We haven't talked about him yet, so I still was able to buy the fact that they were Vulcans. Now compare this to Picard season 3, and we literally have a gangster Vulcan.
Oh God,
we have a gangster Vulcan in in the B plot. There's a gangster Vulcan who has information that let's just say a certain character named Raffi and a certain TNG character who I won't name because it'll spoil the show, have to get this information to find out who is doing this bad stuff in this season. So it's pretty ridiculous. I'll say that. And I was just like, I'm like, this is a Vulcan? I thought this was a Romulan. That was literally my reaction during the live watch. So I don't want to get too much into season 3. But going back to Wrath of Khan, what did you think of the idea of Kirk having a family?
Well, obviously, when you think of Kirk, he's very much a ladies' man. You can tell that obviously there has to be something there. Something must have happened at one point. I think it was great with what the film was trying to tell us. Again, with Kirk as an older man now, he's having to accept responsibility, and the whole thing with, I forget the name of the test, the simulation that they constantly reference. At the start of the film when Savick is doing this simulation. Can you remind you of what that's called, because it escapes me?
Maru.
Yeah, that. And the whole sort of idea that Kirk has been running away from responsibility and death for a long time now, but now is the time where he has to come to face with the consequences of his actions. I felt that was a good way of bringing in David, his son. I think that will work together, and he's having to be a bit more reserved now, and of course it's just yet another person that he has to take responsibility for, obviously his son. So yeah,
and that that was a great moment at the end, after let's just say certain shit goes down, and they have that little moment there. I thought that was really beautifully done. I'm proud to be your son was just very, like, you get off something really hardcore emotional, and then you get that scene. His glasses are broken, so payoff there with with his glasses. and then you get that scene and everything, which was such a, it really gets you in the feels. But what do you think of the battle? What do you think of Khan having the Reliant, and just the way he's just like set lock phasers on target, and he's like, fire! Like, he's just like, it's just like 15 years of pent up emotion. Just like he has that outlet when he just screams fire. Like, he's waited all this time for that moment, and you see it in that performance. And like, it just, I get excited seeing that.
Yeah, I absolutely love the tension in all those scenes. You can just feel the anger coming from Khan. He's been stranded in literal hell for all these years, and Kirk is the person responsible. And in a way, it's kind of funny because Kirk in Spacey thought he was doing a good thing by letting Khan live. He thought, right, we'll put him to good use. But now, Khan doesn't see it that way. He sees him as, this is the man who condemned me, and he caused me this much suffering, and I had to lose my wife because of the situation he put me in. Now, not only do I have to kill him, but I have to make him suffer.
Yeah, and Khan, and the thing was, I mean, Khan just started with all the misery and all the stuff that happened. Khan just started to go down this dark, this dark path that just, there's no coming back from. And at that point, he was practically insane, and he needed, like, Khan in the Spacey was was fairly reasonable. He was still, you know, he still had the superior ambition, which is what drove him to try to steal the Enterprise in the first place. Because that's just how he was. That's how they're wired. That's how the genetic Supermen are wired. Khan in the Wrath of Khan is just. I mean, I'd like to think he's a villain, but I think he's still just an antagonist who's insane and is willing to do anything. Who's a complete wild card. Like he will kill, murder people to get what he wants. And that's just how insane he's gotten. And the thing is, I mean, it wasn't really. He blames Kirk. I mean, this wasn't Kirk's fault as much as you know. You bring it up that, you know, Kirk thought he was doing a good thing. Well, he technically did do a good thing. Like he was giving. He was basically, he understood Khan. Like there's nuance. Like you could just throw him in prison, keep him away, but he knew Khan's nature, and instead of throwing him in prison, you know, he gave him an opportunity to. It would be a difficult one, but it'd be something that could possibly pay off for Khan and his people, you know, to try to rule a planet on their own. Well, they didn't know that SETI Alpha 6, the neighboring planet, would blow up and fuck up the orbit of SETI Alpha 5, which then turned into a Dune like hellhole basically. And like I said, that it's just Khan's another tragic character, you know, that just lost everything, and the only thing he had left with was his revenge. And that's why he had a chance to leave. Like his second in command, Joaquin, was like, he's like, no, sir, you have chance. You can do whatever you want. And he's like, full power, grabs him, full power, and then he just throws him aside, and he uses the console, and continues the pursuit against the Enterprise. And I like how Kirk's like, if there's one thing I'll give him, he's persistent, or he's consistent, excuse me. But one other thing that was unique to this movie, I've brought this up on several streams. Whenever we talk about Wrath of Khan, I always bring this up. The first time I ever understood the idea of completely vaporizing a person was probably from this movie. And the way they vaporized, this way that people got vaporized, is the sound that they make when they get vaporized is so unsettling. Like I think about it now and then. Like they scream when they vaporize, like, and you hear a high pitched scream or squeal or something. You know what I'm talking about? And they never did that again.
Yeah, this film in particular has a lot of things where it's just full of just so much horror.
Yes.
Like, particularly with the things coming out of the ears and then the screaming. It's awful.
And then when they go on to Regular One, Kirk, McCoy, and Savick, what's funny is before they go on to Regular One, Spock is like, Jim, be careful. And McCoy looks at him, he's like, we will, Dick. That's what he wanted to say, Dick. But and then when they're on Regular One, it's like a horror movie. There's a jump scare. Yeah. When McCoy's looking back, he sees a rat. You see the rat, and he's going backwards, and then there's a body hanging right there, and there's your little jump scare. But then again, you know, you didn't hear any screams. These are professionals who have been in the field. They've been on the final frontier for years, so they just handled it like professionals. They didn't scream. They just were trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Jim. So. So they killed everybody on Regular One except for the people that went to the asteroid or hit on the asteroid, which was basically, you know, Carol, David, and a third dude who ultimately got redshirted by Captain Terrell, because Captain Terrell still had those things in his ears. What do you think of that moment where Terrell and Chekhov are holding him at gunpoint?
Well, initially I thought that something would be up, because I doubt that Khan would just leave them or give them sort of back to the crew without there being anything of any significance. So I thought initially, like, something's up here, something's going to happen. And then, of course, when we see the captain shoot himself because he'd rather die than kill Admiral James T. Kirk. I thought yeah, that was very admirable, and then I thought, God, what's Chekhov gonna have to do? But then, fortunately, he just falls to the ground and he's screaming.
Yeah, well, Chekhov's the main character, whereas Terrell was, only in
Yeah.
Wrath of Khan, and they had nothing for him to do. So, they just the script just said off him, so he offed himself.
But the visual of the thing leaving the ear and just crawling out, that's just freaky. And I was reading up and I was watching some sort of videos behind the scenes of how they sort of put the whole things together with the spaceship battles and that sort of thing. Apparently they had to create like full-on dummies of like the actor of Chekhov. They had to like create on a full-on like dummy that like looks exactly like Chekhov in order to do that. I heard
Yeah.
something like that, yeah. Just crazy. And it makes me appreciate the old style of filmmaking of how they put this much effort into all of this. How they got, I think it was like a fish tank or something, and they got like a bunch of chemicals and liquids to create the visuals of space. And it's just crazy, but it's so amazing at the same time.
My favorite shot of one of my favorite Starfield shots, and I use this in my intro. I used it in today. This stream's intro is the rotating shot of the stars. How Wrath of Khan begins. I kind of show it like this. Very slowly rotating and everything. I love that shot, and the shot's long enough for me to use as a Starfield, so I can just cut. It's like a good 5 to 10 seconds. Cut that, and I could any Star Trek intro I want to make. I just use that. So. But what do you think of the music? What do you think of James Horner's score for this one compared to Jerry Goldsmith's motion picture?
Well, I think the Jerry Goldsmith theme is only heard in The Voyage Home. Oh, no, not Voyage. The Final Frontier. I believe that's the time where it's only heard again. But obviously, it's a step down, and I mean, it kind of makes sense for the direction they were going in, the more sort of militaristic. Theme of Starfleet as opposed to the, exploring, discovering new worlds sort of theme. So, I mean, it goes well, but then again, that is the main criticism that I do have, because although I think on paper this film is the best, it's not my favorite. I think it's probably the best out of all of them, in my opinion. It does divert from that original idea of what Star Trek is supposed to be. So that is also a criticism, but the music does go well with what they were trying to present to us, but it's not as enchanting as, I'll use that word a lot. It isn't as enchanting as the things in the motion picture.
Yeah, okay, that's fair. It's different. It's different. I know it's been James Horner's reused several riffs from that theme in other movies, and you can definitely hear them, but I really love, like, I get like emotional when I hear the theme for Wrath of Khan, especially the the opening theme, and the Picard season 3 composer did a very equivalent theme. It's not the same thing, but it's very equivalent in terms of its structure, like similar sounds coming out of that same thing. And I use that theme for my intros too, which has now been now the copyright bots are picking up on that one. So, but okay, here's the one thing that I gotta ask. What did you think of the finale? How Kirk beats Khan and the consequences of what Khan does, and we'll get to the death of Mr. Spock.
Well, I have to say, when I was watching sort of Khan's death, and when the device explodes, that creates, it's sort of like a terraforming device that creates new life. It sort of turns inhabitable planets into planets that, of course, can sustain human life, and it essentially creates all different ecosystems that Earth has on these different planets. And when that happens, I mean, I was expecting there to be a bit more. I can't really remember exactly what Khan's final line is.
To hell's heart I stab at thee. For hate's sake I spit my last breath at thee. That's pretty much the last thing he says.
I don't really know if I I'm like impressed or a bit disappointed by it. And of course, I think it would have been great to actually see Khan and Kirk meet in person, but unfortunately, that never happens. I feel like
No,
if we actually saw an in-person death, I felt like that would have, come across a bit better to me. But I don't think it was bad by any means. It's very much in character for Khan's. It's very much in character for Khan to go out in a way that isn't sort of cowardly. It isn't sort of him regressing as a person in his final moments. He's still the same Khan, when he takes his last breath. Yeah, I mean, I didn't mind that, but I, of course, get into that final part where Kirk looks over to the side and sees that Spock isn't there, and then he hears, Kirk, you better get down here. And then he sees that Spock's chair is empty, and he knows. Like there's some sort of there's always been a connection between him and Spock, and he just knows that something isn't right, and he runs and he's pushing people out the way, like get out of my way, and he jumps down that ladder, and he's trying to get into the chamber, and then Scotty and McCoy are like, no, it's too late, and he's just he just breaks because this is his best friend.
Yeah, it's funny the way that all played out. So like it got there ended up being a countdown. Like the Genesis device on the Reliant was like I think 1 or 2 minutes away from being activated, which would cause the destruction of the ship. And because of that, the Reliant during the attack knocked down the lines of the Enterprise, and they couldn't go to warp. So Spock had to repair the lines in order to do that. And in order to do that, he had to go into that room, and that was flooded with radiation. So what Spock did in that moment was it wasn't quite the same, but it had a lot in common with how the episode Balance of Terror ends. Balance of Terror ends with the Romulan commander played by Mark Leonard, actor that plays Sarek. They appear, and then they move towards they're moving towards the attack on the Enterprise, and Kirk's like fire, and the phaser room is not responding, and then over the intercom he's like, Mr. Styles, can you hear me? Fire, can you hear me? Styles, fire. And then Spock, who was just in getting report from the phaser room, figures out there's something wrong, runs back to the phaser room. The phaser room is flooded with gas. He goes in, and he goes in at the risk of his own life to activate the phasers to destroy the Romulan ship, and he managed to save the life of Styles. The other one, Tomlinson, the one that was supposed to be married at the beginning of that episode, perishes. So, I mean, Spock didn't die, but it felt like I've said this before, and I'll say this again. I feel as much as Space Seed, this was a sequel to the episode Space Seed. There was a lot of Balance of Terror that came to mind when they were writing this movie. And Mr. Howard Bennett, the producer of this movie, watched all the episodes of the original series to familiarize himself with Star Trek. And this movie is basically a direct result of that effort. And that's why me and several other people think this is the best Star Trek movie, because it's just so faithful to the original series. It's not quite what Roddenberry would want. Roddenberry did not like this movie. He actually tried to leak it, so fans knew ahead of time that Spock was going to die. So they added a scene, or they added a scene in the beginning where they had the simulator, and Kirk's like, "Aren't you dead?" And that's where that came from, basically, to kind of kind of lull the viewer into a false sense of security, like, oh, Spock's gonna be fine, he's gonna live. And then you see you see how the movie ends, and you see Spock going into the room. One thing I liked was the music that they played, and they cut between the formation of Genesis, which was basically life from lifelessness. So you're seeing something born, cut to Kirk trying to get to Spock, who was about to die. You see how they kind of juxtapose each other. Yeah, I thought that was a very interesting way to show how Kirk is playing that, or how Kirk trying to get to Spock. It just makes that scene even more emotional. And then the music that James Horner composed for that particular moment just still stands out. Like my eyes are watering right now thinking about that.
Yeah. And when we go onto the sort of funeral, not funeral, but they're sending off Spock in the sort of casket to the newly created planet, and Kirk has that little lump in his throat when he says, out of all the souls that I've met across my travels, he was the most. And then he stops and he goes, human.
Yeah. Yeah, he nearly lost him when he said his was the most. And then he composed himself. He said human or something off the corner of his mouth. So like, yeah, you could see the pain he was in. Such, once again, brilliant acting from Mr. Shatner in that scene. He didn't just break out crying because now it's to be a captain or admiral, be a commander, you have to be composed, because you have crew looking up to you, and looking to you for the next decision, the next word, or the next task at hand. So, and if they lose faith in you, then you lose command, which was said in The Enemy Within. So, but so they leave off Spock on Genesis. The movie is a massive success, and I love how it ends with Nimoy giving the Space the Final Frontier, opening the opening monologue of the original series. And it kind of makes you wonder: is this the end, or is there going to be a follow up? But with what Nimoy's monologue, it's like, nope, Star Trek's going to continue without Spock, or maybe it'll continue with Spock. Maybe they'll bring him back somehow. And so, what did they do? So, in case the movie was successful, they added a clip where they added a clip where he mind melds with McCoy, and then he says, "Remember," and then that leads us directly into Search for Spock.
So, as I said, I think that The Wrath of Khan objectively is probably the best movie. However, I would say my favorite was The Search for Spock.
Interesting. That's a very irregular opinion. So yeah, I can't wait to hear why you feel that way.
Well, should we get on to The Search for Spock then?
Yep.
Okay, so we pick up, where Wrath of Khan finished. They're going back to, well, assuming it's a star base, sort of a space station, and the Enterprise is to be decommissioned. They're sort of being cast aside, and then we see McCoy acting up a bit. He's gone into Spock's quarters, which Kirk has clearly guarded off, and we hear that there's someone's entered his quarters, and Kirk's like, what? And then he goes in and he sees McCoy in the dark, and he grabs him, and he's talking very irregularly, and it sounds like Spock. It sounds like the type of things that Spock would say. So we know something's up. Then we get back and we see them all sort of getting off the Enterprise. This is where they're going to have to part ways. But then we see Spock's father, who comes along, and he says, how could you leave my son after what he told you? And Kirk's thinking, he didn't tell me anything. What are you on about? And then he eventually reveals to him, we have a way in the Vulcan society that when you die, of course, you pass on all your knowledge and everything that you've learned and you've come to see to another person, so that it lives on. And and then Kirk finally pieces it together that, McCoy was acting strange earlier. He was sort of giving off signs that there was something there with Spock. So they go and find McCoy, but he is he's gone into sort of like a club, and he's trying to find some credits to get a ship to go back to Vulcan to sort of exchange this knowledge. And then Kirk and the crew get together and they set off. But first they go to the planet where Spock was sent to, because Savick, who's part of another ship now, they've detected some life signs on there, so they go down, check it out, and weird things are happening with this planet. The terraforming device was very unstable. Of course, it's now sort of destroying itself. You also have the Klingons who are making their way to this planet. So you have loads of tension there. So Savick goes down and she finds that, Spock has been reborn, but he's gone back to early stages of life. And because the terraforming device was sort of out of control and it sort of accelerated the aging process of not only the planet and the ecosystems, but also Spock. So he's gone from that child to a teenager. So that thing's happening. And one thing I do love about this film in particular is the tension between Kirk and the Klingon played by Christopher Lloyd. I think there's a lot there, and I do like that. And I don't know what the general opinion is of that, but I feel like, not as good as a villain as Khan per se, but I felt like he was a very good, rival for Kirk. I don't know. What do you think about that? Because I thought it was a pretty good villain, in my opinion.
Oh, Krug was a great villain. Like, he was smart, he was menacing, and you just after what happens, you want him to die. Like, he's a great villain. He doesn't have as memorable dialogue as Khan did. But hey, with Krug, you got to actually see Kirk fight, older Kirk have a fight, just like he did in the original series. So I thought the fight was hilarious. How he just jumps, he literally jumps and dives on Krug from the cliff, and then of course when Krug is holding on for his life, Kirk actually is like, hey, let me your hand and everything, and he grabs his foot trying to drag him with him, and Kirk just is like, okay, that's it. And then he kicks him. He's like, I have had enough of you. And then just, kicks him into the lava, very, very, very villain type of death, But three's my favorite sequence from 3. And one thing that 3 did better than 2, and you might agree with me, was that they really utilized every character, all the main characters. So, like, I feel like Wrath of Khan didn't really utilize Sulu or Uhura that well. They were just kind of there, and they were just kind of there on the bridge, they had a few lines and stuff, but they weren't really, and they were also in the Kobayashi simulator. But that was pretty much it. This movie, they had bigger roles to play, especially when they steal the Enterprise from the space.
They all have something.
I love that. I loved them stealing the Enterprise from Space Dock. The theme, the James Horner thing that played, and then Kirk's like goes up to McCoy's like, how many fingers am I holding up? That's not very damn funny. What did you think of what do you think of what do you think of the world building in 3, where you find out as a direct result of Wrath of Khan, that the whole Genesis thing has become a bit of a controversy, galactic controversy?
Well, yeah, I thought it made sense for the story because, of course, Starfleet is this big sort of world government, and they've been hiding this sort of technology. So, of course, when it becomes public knowledge, not only the people of Earth, but also other races like the Klingons, of course, they're going to be filled with jealousy, and they're going to be greedy for this. Of course, they want to conquer. They want as much technology and weapons on their side as possible. So of course it's going to get their attention. So I think it was very good how they carried on, the consequences of the Wrath of Khan. They didn't forget it. They didn't push it aside. There was a lot of consistency there.
I'm just gonna warn you. That's one thing New Trek is not known for: continuity, consequences, and consistency. So, but that's beside the point. But that's one reason why I love Search for Spock, and the Enterprise being decommissioned. So Savick and David are now in the Grissom, and then the Grissom gets destroyed in a single lucky shot by the Klingon ship, Krug's ship. And one thing you notice about Krug, how dangerous he is. I mean, not only did he destroy the ship in the beginning that had the Genesis data on it, or some of the data regarding Genesis, which is how he finds out about it in the first place. Because remember, he destroys the ships because the woman Valkyrie looks at the data, and he's like, "Oh, that's unfortunate." And then she's like, "Oh, okay, I guess that's it. So thanks." He's like, "You'll be remembered with honor." And then he blasted the two people that were transported. Like, what's going on? Are we gonna get paid? And she's like, "Soon, Captain, very soon." It's so bad, it's terrible. And then he executes one of his men for accidentally destroying the Grissom because he said he ordered target engines only, and the ship destroyed the missiles, or the weapons destroyed the entire ship in a single shot. So yeah, he executed his weapons officer. And you had a vaporization there, but you didn't hear a scream like you did in Wrath of Khan. So I thought that was kind of disappointing, but there you go. What did you think of the whole or how Spock kind of metamorphosized back into Nimoy?
That whole thing is a funny one because, I mean, do I think of it as a smart story decision for this whole idea that this is what Vulcans do upon their death, or is it kind of a cheap, cop out? Because it's never really mentioned before, so I felt like the groundwork wasn't there. But of course, I'm glad that they did find a way to bring Spock back, because of course it's Spock. I absolutely love the character of Spock. But I mean, it is a funny one. How do I feel about it? I feel as if I did like the fact that, again, they didn't just forget the consequences, because of course when we start the voyage home, he's learning again. He's having to learn the languages and protocols and the knowledge again. So I do like that. But when we come to the end where he's fully formed back into Nimoy, and then he goes around to each member of the crew and he looks at them, and you can see that he's piecing it all together, like, I remember you, and I remember you. And then he goes up to Kirk, and then you just see those two stand side by side. And yes, these two are back together again. This is, the dream team back together. And then they all come in for that massive group hug. That was just, that was just beautiful, in my opinion.
I love, I think the most beautiful moment was McCoy talking to an unconscious Spock. And McCoy's like, Spock, for God's sakes, talk to me. And then he's just like, I'll probably never admit this when you're awake, but I missed you. And I don't ever want to lose you again. Or something. I'm paraphrasing it, of course, but it's just the way DeForest Kelley really delivered that moment was really, really something. And he does something very similar in Star Trek V when he's confronted with, with his pain. But we'll get to that. But I thought that I loved the McCoy. McCoy was great. DeForest Kelley was great. Kind of picking up for. Stepping up, kind of picking up, because now Nimoy's not it. So he's kind of the second character after Shatner now. So, and McCoy is the reason why they had to do this in the first place. But yeah, the Felter Pond, the refusing of minds, it's gone down. It's just kind of gone down to, Vulcans or aliens. So now you got they're magical aspects now. First you had the, first they were telepathic, to solve the Dagger of the Mind episode, and now they're now you got some magic where they can just they can merge, they can fuse bodies. It's crazy, but they had to come up with a way to do it, and this was a very 80s way to do it, and I still really love Search for Spock. It's definitely number 3. That and 4 Voyage Home are tied for number 3 on my Star Trek, my ranking of Star Trek films. So it starts with 2, then 6, and then 3 equals 4, then 1, and then 5.
Oh, okay. Well, what I would say is my favorite scene from the Search for Spock, one that we haven't talked about. So I love when the crew first make their way onto Vulcan, and you see the ship going through the different sort of pathways, and you just get a nice sort of sequence where they go through Vulcan. And they go through the different hills and the different structures, and you see all the people running to go to the ship because, of course, they know that Spock is returning. And then they land, and Uhura's there, and they're all sort of greeted, and they go through the different caves. I just thought that was just beautiful because there isn't a lot of dialogue there, but it's showing you the beauty of this planet. And of course, I watched the motion picture. I saw the theatrical cut, and of course, Vulcan looks very different there. It looks like a giant volcano.
They Vulcan in the motion picture was let's just say for the director's version, they fixed a lot of stuff. One thing that was introduced in the Man Trap when Spock is having his little flirty, well, Uhura is having her flirty conversation with Spock. Spock's in command, and Kirk and McCoy are on the planet surface dealing with this the salt creature. He literally says Vulcan has no moon, Miss Uhura, because when she's trying to say, oh, what do Vulcans do for going out, enjoying seeing the moon on the horizon, and he's like, Vulcan has no moon. And then you see moons in frickin' the theatrical version, but they removed them for the director's version. So yeah, you're right, it was like a volcano. The whole Kolinar ceremony and everything. I love the music for. I did love the music for that scene. It was very. You felt like you were in another universe. You felt like you were somewhere else, which was part of the magic of the motion picture. You weren't really taken out of the movie quite as much, even though the movie was, as you said, it suffered from pacing issues. That's probably its biggest issue. And plus, we're watching them watching a view screen for a good portion of it. So
yeah,
and it's hypnotic though. Like I've put me to sleep a few times, but yeah. But I have to answer this question right here. Smash or pass Uhura? Smash, obviously. Since Shawn Nichols. Rest in peace, by the way.
Yeah.
Oh, but yeah, so 3 kind of ends, and they're on Vulcan. So what happens next?
Well, obviously, following on from number 3, where the crew stole the Enterprise, and they, they.
Oh, we didn't talk about that. We didn't talk about that.
Yeah.
What do you think of the destruction of the Enterprise?
Well, I don't know how to feel about that, because when we get to the motion picture, the whole Enterprise has been refitted and it's totally different. And they make a bigger point that this is not the Enterprise that you remember. It's totally different. So when it gets destroyed, I mean, I don't view it as the same ship that we had in the original series. So it didn't really impact me that much, from being honest.
That's the thing. It was the original ship from the original series. That's why it was impactful for me, at least. And he's like, my God, Bones, what have I done? He's like, what you had to do, what you always do, to give us a fighting chance to live.
It's kind of that. I don't know if you've heard of this, but it's kind of like that analogy where people say, like, if you have a brush, but then you change the handle and every part of it, is it the same brush? Or people have said it with ships as well. If you change all the all the pieces of wood and replace them with the new pieces of wood, is it the same ship? And I feel like that's what comes to play with me. It's that they made a big point in the motion picture that everything about the Enterprise now is totally different. The engine room, the bridge, everything is totally different. This is not the Enterprise that you remember. They literally make that point very clear. So when it comes to the destruction of this Enterprise, although yes, it is the same Enterprise, it doesn't feel that way to me.
Okay, that's fair. But it was very, like, I'll just tell you this. New Trek kind of tried to copy this in their movie Star Trek Beyond, because Star Trek Beyond was the third JJ verse film. They tried to do something similar, and it had none of the impact, whatsoever. So this movie had a lot of impact. There was a lot of weight with what was going on. Even So, but it was. I love the sequence where they're on the Klingon ship, and they fool the Klingons into thinking that they're still on board, and they have the destruct thing going off, and they're like, we're hearing something. And they don't know what it means, and they put the communicator right up against the console, and you hear like 5, 4, and then Christopher Lloyd's like, get out of there now, get out. That was like freaking Doc. Yeah, I was thinking that's like a Doc Brown scream right there, and this was right before he played Doc Brown too. I think this was like, I think he went from doing this, working for Mr. Nimoy, to working for Zemeckis and Back to the Future.
And that's also a thing as well, is that 3 and 4 were films directed by Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah,
and I like his direction, I must say.
The 4. So this movie, Nimoy. So here's the thing: Nimoy became director of this film because they asked him. I think it was Michael Eisner was running Paramount in like '82, and Wrath of Khan just came out that summer. And they asked Nimoy, "Hey, do you want to be involved with the next Star Trek film?" Because Star Trek Wrath of Khan was already extremely successful, made so much money, had very fraction of the budget that the motion picture did. Wrath of Khan, I don't know if you noticed, but they reused a lot of stuff from the motion picture. Epsilon 9 was flipped and then became Regular 1. The Klingon ships in motion picture were used for the Kobayashi Maru simulator. Same shots, same everything. And TNG has reused stuff from the motion picture as well. So motion picture created a lot of stuff for later films to reuse. What was I getting at? So by the time the Star Trek 2, Star Trek 2 became super duper successful, they asked Nimoy, "Do you want to be involved with Star Trek 3 in some capacity?" He's like, "Yes, I want to direct." And they looked at each other and they looked at him, and they're like, "Done." They thought about it and they're like, "Done." Okay. So they gave Nimoy a chance to prove himself, and I think he did a really good job making Star Trek 3 extremely cinematic. He's a photographer, so he knows how to craft a good image. A lot of great shot composition. And it was actually originally the villains were supposed to be Romulans. And he decided to change them to Klingons because he felt the Klingons were more cinematic. Curious what your thoughts on that are. Do you think the Klingons are more cinematic as opposed to pointed-eared Romulans?
I would say, and one thing that obviously that the movies did different about the Klingons is that they have their sort of bumpy forehead design that's used further on, whereas in the original series they were just sort of makeup. I wonder, in universe, is there an explanation to that, or is it just sort of a thing that we have to just accept?
They attempted to do something like that in Enterprise in the fourth season of Enterprise, which was the final season. Fourth season had a new showrunner, Manny Coto. And Manny Coto was a huge fan of the original series, and he wanted to tie in Enterprise with the original series because the earlier seasons still felt very Next Generation era, even though Enterprise takes place 100 years before the original series, which was a reason why a lot of people didn't like Enterprise in the first place because of that reason. It just didn't feel like it was a prequel. Some people didn't even feel like they needed to make a prequel to the original series. I was one of those people that felt like they didn't need to do that. But Enterprise actually, was not a bad series. Like, it still felt like you were watching a Star Trek series. It got better. Each season got better and better. So
I've heard that the finale is a bit sort of weird, though, because it's from the perspective of the Next Generation characters.
Correct. Yeah, the finale was probably season 4 was stellar, except for the finale. The finale is probably the worst episode of the series, and it felt kind of shoehorned in. And yeah, like you said, it was from the perspective of the TNG. So we don't really know. A lot of people don't even consider that to be a true finale because it could be false.
I do like the introduction sequence to Enterprise, though. The song, I mean,
I hated the song. It's been
come on,
road getting from there to here. I hate that song so much compared to Voyager's Jerry Goldsmith theme. You go from hearing the Voyager theme, which is another master class of Jerry Goldsmith, of just another welcome addition, and then you hear that, and you're just like, "What the hell is this?" I love it. So every time I watch Enterprise, I always I'll listen to it once and then I'll skip it because I didn't really watch Enterprise until I got the DVDs, which I have. Well, it's kind of cut off. I'm playing at Deep Space Nine now, but Enterprise is off the. I'll move my. Okay, I'm not gonna do that. Never mind. I'm not gonna do that. But we got. Enterprise was just it was a great series. I like the ending theme. The ending theme felt very Star Trek. I think it was Dennis McCarthy that did that. So, but yeah, we'll talk when you get to Enterprise.
So we were on to Voyage Home. We sort of diverted to it, but yeah, Voyage Home I would say is the most fun. I'd say it's the most.
Yeah,
fun
Nimoy was able to get like I think almost full creative control for this. So he did not have full creative control for Search for Spock, but he did for this one. So a lot of stuff, a lot of his ideas were really put into this film. Like the idea of making this into a comedy was something that was, he did have some pushback, but he ultimately, prevailed in the end. So there was no villain, there's no antagonist this time. The only issue, I mean, well, I guess you could say the whale probe was an antagonist, but not really. It's just there being itself, and it's trying to make contact with the with whales, and because there's no whales, there's no one to respond to it, and so its effect on the Earth's ecosystem is, well, I mean, destructive.
Yeah.
I like how they figure out, and they're like, "Yeah, go back in time." They talk to whales to tell this probe to go and do what with itself. And Kirk's like, "Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, that's what we're doing. We're going to go back in time." And they're just like, "Okay, we're just gonna, yeah, let's just go." Remember how they went back in time in Tomorrow Was Yesterday? The slingshot effect. Well, they do that here, and that's how they time travel.
I've always wondered, like, why don't some of the other races, like the Klingons, use this slingshot method for time travel? Because obviously, if they could go to the past, that would just be absolutely amazing. Because they could go back to a time where humanity wasn't as technologically evolved, and they could literally just take over.
Yeah, that's the problem with time travel. That's a problem with introducing time travel like that. So that's one of the issues Star Trek has had. Like in New Trek and Discovery, the Klingons have time crystals that are guarded on the planet Boreth, I believe, where the Boreth is a planet that you will see in TNG. And they brought this whole Klingon crystal, time crystal thing, and it was just as mind-boggling as just the idea that they just go back in time whenever they want. Well, not quite whenever they want, when they have to. But yeah, why don't maybe it's a super duper secret Starfleet thing, and no other races know about it, which I doubt. But maybe no other races know about it. Mm-hmm. I don't think anybody really truly knows why. But yeah.
But yeah, I loved it was weird when they first go back in time, the team go unconscious, and then there's this sort of weird CGI sequence where their faces are being reconstructed, but it's very uncanny. It looks very plasticky. Of course, it's probably fully CGI, and that's why. Yeah, but one thing I would say is when they first land, and then it switches from the nighttime in the field where they land, and then it goes to the day we're in the big city, and then you see that montage. I love that. That is amazing. I love them reacting to certain things, like when they're walking across the road and then the cars are coming along, and then they
watch where you're going, you dumbass.
And then
double dumbass on you.
And then I don't remember who it is, but most of the team are like, "Sir, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, it's customary, You just say this back to them." And they're all just sort of baffled by it.
Yeah, colorful metaphors. People won't pay attention to you until you swear every other word. It's in the literature of the time.
And then Spock does that, but he takes it too literally. And then Kirk's like, "Just stop.
Just one damn minute. Just one damn minute, Admiral. When are those? When's the? I forget what he asked. He asked Spock something. And he's like, "When are those shields coming on?" or something. It's just wait one damn second, Admiral. And then you have the whole thing with the they go on the bus, and Kirk finds out who the whales are that they want. George and Gracie, named after the two comedians, Burns and Allen, and you have the two whales, and I think he's like, "How do you know this?" Spock asks Kirk, "How do you know about these whales?" He's like, "Simple logic." And then they go on the bus, and they get off. They're like, "What does he mean exact change?" Because they had some money, and so the glasses come back into this movie. Kirk sells the glasses for $100. He's like, "I'll give you $100." The guy's like the what do you call a person that handles antiques? I forget what you call them. But he's like, "I'll give you $100 for it." He's like, "Is that a lot?" And so we get scenes like we get moments like that, and then we get like with when Kirk and Spock are at the aquarium, and Spock goes into the like we hear like how humpback whales are are on the verge of extinction because of whalers and all that. And then Spock goes and dives into the Spock dives into the tank, and he mind melts with the whale. He mind melts with the whale, gets back up. And he's like, "What were you doing, messing in my tank and messing with my whales?" And he's like, "They like you very much, but they are not the hell your whales." Oh yeah, did they tell you that? The hell they did. It's just it's so funny. Like I no matter how many times I've seen this movie, it always cracks me up seeing that. Just me talking about this cracks me up.
And when they're on the bus, they come into a bit of a argument with that punk rocker who's playing all the music, and I believe that he actually returns in Picard.
He does Picard season 2.
Yeah, I don't want to even ask how that happened. That's just
member Barry. I mean that's what New Trek really likes to resort to. But like but the punk rocker was Leonard Nimoy's assistant. Kirk Thatcher is his name. And yeah, he wrote and performed that punk song himself. That's his voice on the radio. I say I hate you and I berate you and I say screw you. That's the song. And yes, and they're like, to shut up that damn noise. And then Spock knocks him out the nerve pinch, and everybody just starts clapping. And then Kirk joins in the applause right there. And you get that great Kirk's telling him, you don't always have to tell the truth and everything. You don't have to call me Admiral. He's like, I can't tell a lie. And this was before, once like after this, like Vulcans have been capable of lying. That's one issue that people have with Enterprise, because the Vulcans are pretty Vulcans are pretty present in Enterprise because they're well, you haven't watched the series yet, so I can't really say. But let's just say the Vulcans are very prominent in Enterprise, and they lie quite a bit, which was one issue that fans had with Vulcans, or at least with Enterprise. Because one thing that original series and Spock established is that Vulcans cannot tell a lie. And then I guess they kind of forgot about that to write, for the sake of story. So,
but then they go to, you don't have to lie, just exaggerate.
Yeah, remember you used to do that, exaggerate. And he's like, the hell I can't, because they're pretty. We're once again referencing Wrath of Khan with the whole how Kirk goes Khan, and everybody knows that scene. But that whole point of that scene was to convince Khan that they were completely cut off from the Enterprise when they actually weren't, and that they knew that they were being listened to. So that which was brilliant. But yeah, like the whole which is, and then Spock exaggerates talking to them, but that's where it came from. But what do you think of like another part I really liked was when she picks them up, when Jillian, the aquarium lady, Dr. Taylor is her name, picks them up, and they have a conversation with her, and they're like, "How do you know Gracie?" Like Nimoy or Spock literally says Gracie's pregnant, and then she fully breaks the car, and she's like, "How the hell do you know that? Nobody knows about that." And he's like, "Well, Gracie does." It's so funny. And then then Kirk's like, "I can't explain it to you now, but maybe we could explain it over dinner. I want to use your whales for something." And then she's like, "Is Italian okay?" And Kirk's like, "Yes." And then Spock's like, No. And Kirk's like, "Yes, I love Italian. And so do you, Spock." And then he's like, "Yes." and then they drop him off. He's like, "Is he going to crawl around the bushes while we eat?" It's his way. It's his way, because they drop him off in Central Park. I just love that. Like, it's so funny. It's so fun. Like I like the fact that I'm laughing, reciting these lines tells you something. Like it never. That's how you do comedy in Star Trek. You have the characters be themselves. But you take them out of their normal situation, and they don't know how to particularly act or how to particularly behave. and so it's kind of like a clashing of things situations, and that's how you can make good humor in Star Trek. You don't just like make fun, make the characters look stupid or act stupid and everything. That doesn't work, which is something New Trek has done, and it's not good.
Yeah,
especially humor that's very mean spirited towards characters. Like, even if we want to laugh, at like these character situations, we don't want to laugh at the characters themselves.
Yeah,
There's still there's still some respect and dignity that still has to be observed.
Of course,
which I feel 4 has captured that well. The fish out of water element of comedy here is just gold, and it was all Nimoy.
Yeah, he did it. He did it perfectly. Yeah. So getting on to the woman, what's her name again? The
Jillian, Dr. Jillian Taylor.
Dr. Jillian Taylor. So yeah, so the two go to dinner, and it's a I don't really know what it reminds me of, but it's like a trope in most sort of 80s sci-fi films where you have the person who's very grounded on Earth. Or if you look at something like Flight of the Navigator or E.T. or something, and they're learning about these different worlds that this person has come from, and it sort of gives me that vibe as well. It's that, we don't really know, because you have to think about it, in the Star Trek films as well, we haven't really seen much of Earth. You don't really see that much of Earth up until this point. So Kirk is still trying to describe to us what Earth is like, because we don't properly know ourselves. So it is sort of that big moment where our eyes are being opened up to the future, of course, because we've juxtaposed the technological future of Earth that we see in the other films with this 80s Earth and how different it is. So yeah, it just works absolutely amazing. And of course, me watching it now, one downside to that is, of course, I don't actually live in the time where this film has just come out and it's actually featuring the time zone of the present, because of course I'm here in 2023, whereas people back then, when they went back to the 80s, that was the time that people were living in. So that is one downside to it, of course. But yeah, I can understand objectively how that would have resonated a lot with people.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Because the characters are coming to them essentially.
Yeah, they're coming to us, and they're trying to adapt to how we do things, things that we take for granted. They're kind of trying to understand and kind of struggling to adapt, and that's where a lot of the humor comes from, because that's generally stuff that humans laugh at. Things that we relate to, and things that other people have a hard time, adapting to. And there's a lot. It's complicated, but that's kind of what we laugh at. We laugh at stuff that's familiar to us, that we can kind of understand, and that's just our way of coping, or just really. It's hard for me to explain. I have to really research humor in order to get a good insight onto that. But I liked how it ended. Like, there was no destruction, there was no pew-pewing. They simply solved the problems. They had to really come up with several courses of action in order to not only go to the 20th century, but to escape the 20th century, or to get back to the 23rd century. So one of the things that they had to do was collect photons in order to recrystallize the dilithium in the Klingon ship. So what happened? So what would happen? So they sent Chekhov and Uhura to the Enterprise, which it wasn't really the Enterprise, but that was basically the battleship, or that was basically the battleship Enterprise. And Chekhov gets caught. Chekhov is Russian, gets caught, and this is 1986. What was still going on in 1986? Something cold, wasn't it? Certain Soviet Republic or Union was still still a thing. It wasn't his last years, but it was still a thing. Especially, and then you had the funny, and then going even before that, they're asking where the naval base is in Alameda in San Francisco, and the cop is just the traffic cop is just staring at Chekhov, because he's clearly Russian, and he's asking about where the naval base is. So you just had. I mean, when I was a kid, I didn't understand that, but as an adult, that's what I love about these movies. Like you watch them as kids, they're entertaining, but when you watch them as adults, you understand what the writers were thinking of and what they were trying to say without saying it, and giving it a humorous edge too. But like, so Chekhov gets caught in the ship. They're questioning him, and the ray gun doesn't work. They call, I think the interrogator calls him a retard because they're like, he's like, what's your name? Well, no, what's my name? Hey, if you play games with us, you're through. He's like, I am. Can I go now? And then he tries to flee. He falls. He goes to the hospital, and then we get this nice this hilarious rescue of Chekhov from Kirk and McCoy. Jillian goes with them because she's the other star of the movie, so she's going to come with them regardless. And I love like how McCoy is like reacting to the 20th century medicine. Jim, don't leave him in the hands of 20th century medicine. So like not only is we're laughing at their things, they're making fun of us too. That's the other thing. Like when they first get into orbit around Earth, they're like, where are we? And Spock's like, judging from the pollution content of the atmosphere, I'd say we're in the late 20th century. Like shit like that. It was making fun of us, making fun of humanity. Very, very self-deprecating.
Yeah, and that's what works. That's what works well. Whereas, nowadays there are certain things that you're not supposed to make fun of, or certain things that, people say are, beyond humor, or they shouldn't be looked down upon. Whereas, back then everything should be the subject of ridicule, and that's where the humor comes from.
Yeah.
And it's us in general as humanity as well, because you have these people who are looking down on us as, they're totally different. They come from a totally different world. So having that, out of their perspective does create a lot of humor. Like, as you say, this film is, a big fish out of water story.
Yeah. And it just like, as I've been saying, like when we get to the hospital, and like they're in the elevator. Well, actually, I think even before that, McCoy passes an old woman, and she's just like, he's like, what's the matter with you? And she's like, I have kidney dialysis. And then I think he looks around. I think he might even have looked at the camera. I don't think he broke the fourth wheel, but I think he nearly did. And he's like, what is this, the Dark Ages? And he's like, here, take these pills and just call me if you need me. And then right after they're being chased out of the thing, we see her, she's happy, she's smiling, and you hear the doctor saying, I can't believe it, she grew a new kidney. How did it, what happened? And they're baffled. Just to go to show you how advanced how almost magical and advanced medicine is in Star Trek. But it was you had that, and then you have they're in the elevator, and these two surgeons are betting on whether the patient will live or something along that lines. And then McCoy is just like he just like rolls his eyes, and he's like, do you have another diagnosis? He's like, no, I just feel like I'm the goddamn Spanish Inquisition right here. So you had that, and then of course they get to the room where Chekhov's in. You have the surgical team are about to like drill holes to relieve pressure because Chekhov has a head injury, and then McCoy gets into an argument with the head surgeon on how to properly treat it. And they're like fundoscopic examination is inconclusive in these matters. The artery must be repaired. So get out of the way and let me save this patient before it's too late. And then of course, the doctor's like, I'm going to have you removed. And then Kirk, forces them into a little, back room and then melts the lock and everything. And then they get chased out. It was great. It was just great. Oh yeah. Chekhov, they put this little thing on Chekhov's head and he's like, they're like, officer, name, rank. He's like, Chekhov, Pavel, rank, Admiral. And they're like, okay, he's good. And then of course they take off and they get back and they let the whales go. There's a nice little tense moment where it gets stuck and Kirk has to swim down underneath because they crash into San Francisco Bay, and he has to open the hatch in order for the whales to get out. And then, of course, the whales do their thing. They sing, and then the probe goes away.
I thought that scene as well, where they all jump in the water and then they pull Spock in, and that is just the best. And it felt like that was very much the cast just having fun, and they decided to keep it in.
Yeah, I agree. They were having a lot of fun. Kirk, Shatner was jealous like the whole time. Like Shatner had this clause in his contract is if Nimoy got something, he'd get it too. So that's the reason why the next film, Star Trek V, was given to him. Yeah. He wrote and directed that one, and we'll get into.
Unfortunately, it didn't work out well.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But there was one last thing I want to talk about with 4 that I felt was very important. That was years in the making, and I'm glad they kind of did that. So one thing that we didn't talk about Journey to Babel, but remember in Journey to Babel season 2 where we first meet Sarek and Spock's parents, Sarek and Amanda.
Yes.
And we learn about how Spock and his father don't have the best relationship. Yeah. Because Spock decided to join Starfleet instead of going to the Vulcan Science Academy, which was what his father wanted him to do. Well, at the end of 4 felt like a kind of conclusion to that arc, that little arc right there between father and son. It felt very heartwarming. It felt very like, they managed to bury the hatchet right there.
Yeah.
With their final talk.
Yeah.
And I think it was big part of it was because of Spock's death and Sarek not really truly appreciating his son and how much he cared about his son. And you will see that further in the Star Trek The Next Generation episode, Sarek, which is season 3. I'm not going to even, I might have spoiled a little bit of it. I might have just spoiled a little bit of it for you, but that was, dude, you're going to, that's season 3. You're going to love that episode.
Okay. Well, I look forward to it.
Yeah. So, but that was a great little final, it was a great little conclusion to an arc. And then, of course, at the end of the movie, we get another Enterprise, the Enterprise A. And then that leads into Star Trek V, everybody's favorite Star Trek movie.
Also, one thing I want to say about the Voyage Home is I love the bit where the crew have to stand before the sort of court, so to speak. And Kirk has always made it clear that he doesn't want to be like an admiral. He doesn't want to have to go around doing administrative work. He wants to be an explorer, an adventurer. So when they say, so Admiral Kirk, we've decided to demote you to captain, you just see him smile. He's like, yes.
Because that started in Wrath of Khan. The whole idea, the whole theme of getting older and doing a job that's just nowhere near as rewarding. The one thing that Wrath of Khan has really started and has been doing ever since, Star Trek's been doing this ever since, been reusing that concept, is that the captaincy is the first and best job in Starfleet, or is the best job in Starfleet. And when you go out there, you're really making an impact, and and you have to admit though, you're going out in the final frontier. It is dangerous. It is extremely dangerous and extremely exhilarating just to go out there and to learn new things, or even doing simple tasks out in space. Is like you need to have a working crew. You need to have people that are very strong, that can handle emergencies, because space is the most hazardous thing. I'm going to go on a pessimistic thing, but humanity, as much as Star Trek says humanity is meant to go out in space, there's also the other side where some science fiction writers are like, maybe mankind was never meant to go out in space because of how vast it is, how much of a void it is. So my take is that it is extremely hazardous. It is hazardous and it's the most dangerous. And in order to effectively go out and explore the final frontier, you have to have the best of the best. And you have to have those that understand the philosophy of you, just like, once again, exploring strange new worlds, not seeking or, overcoming issues, learning from conversations, learning from discourse, understanding that not everybody's going to agree with you, but that you still have to work together. I mean, that's what the Starship is. You have people of so many different backgrounds, so many different ideologies coming together and working to to push mankind further into the universe. Because I mean, let's face it, even Earth is not going to last forever. Our sun is not going to last forever. I mean, maybe several million, or maybe it's a couple billion years, but still, it's one of these days, in whatever form we are, we're going to have to go out there if we want to survive.
Yeah, that is true. And that's the fundamental message of Star Trek.
So I like the message that, we can go out there and we can do, we can do that. But like, it's also interesting hearing the other side of it. So you kind of got to balance that out. And I listen to this one channel called Collative Learning. I don't know if you ever heard. He's Scottish, and he talks quite a bit about film. He does a lot of film analysis, and he talks quite a bit about 2001. And like 2001 doesn't really tell you much of anything. There's very little dialogue. It's all in the visual, composition shots and presentation. And he thinks that 2001 is basically trying to tell the viewer that maybe space is not, like I said, maybe space is not meant for us. That it's actually way more out in left field than something like Star Trek would provide. So definitely a channel I'd recommend if you're really into film analysis.
Oh,
he talks quite a bit of like Kubrick. He talks a lot. He has hundreds of videos talking about like Kubrick stuff, because Kubrick doesn't talk. Kubrick never comments on what he does and why he does stuff. So he always leaves it to the viewer to decide. So many people have theories on why he has certain things in his movies, from like, simple props to simple shirts that say, NASA rocket launch in The Shining. Is he, because, people believe that he filmed the faking of the moon landing and everything, all those type of conspiracies and all that. So,
yeah.
But yeah, that's just a great, that's just a great, great channel. So definitely check him out. But yeah, so I'm sorry, I kind of derailed this a little bit. So, but yeah, Voyage Home, great movie, great conclusion to what I call the Star Trek trilogy, which begins with Khan, continues with Search for Spock, and then ends with the Voyage Home. And then we get Star Trek V, which kind of feels like a movie that it's got some great character moments. Yeah, great Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. The main plot of the movie is not the best. Want to talk about it?
Yeah. So we start the film with Kirk climbing up a mountain, and he falls, and then he gets saved by Spock, who has these sort of like rocket thruster boots. I don't know where they came from, but the fundamental message of that scene is that Kirk knew he wasn't going to die there and then, because he was surrounded by his friends or his family. Now there they are, essentially his family. And he says, when he dies, he knows he's going to be alone, because, as long as he has the people around him that he cares about, he knows he's going to be safe and he's going to be fine. And that's sort of the theme that is carried out throughout the movie. Of course, this movie, I would say, even though it's the worst out of all of the six, the relationship between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy is just the thing that sells it. I think if they didn't have all three of them together, then this film would just be an absolute disaster. But the thing that saves it is these three.
And like even them singing "Row, row, row your boat" was just like, I like those scenes better than like the main stuff in the movie.
Yeah.
Like they're like if you know this, how do you not know "Row, row, row your boat"? And then he's like, "I'm sorry, Doctor, were we singing?" And then McCoy's like, "I liked him." He's like, "I liked him better before he died, Jim." Stuff like that made me laugh. And then they're doing the I don't know if you're familiar with it. There's an old 70s show called The Waltons, where it's like a Little House on the Prairie type of show, but it takes place in the 19th century, and you have this big family, lots of kids, and they're all like, every episode ends with "Good night, person," "Good night, this guy," then "Good night, this," "Good night, you," and then because there's so many people saying good night to each other, they kind of did something like that with this. And I like how McCoy's like, "Good night, Spock." They're all saying good night to it. That was a nice little gag. But what do you think of going into the main story now? What did you think of Kirk's or not Kirk, Spock's half brother, Cybok?
I mean, again, it's a character that does sort of represent what Star Trek is. It's the need for, well, it's humanity's need to go on and find, God essentially, and this is what happens. And he has this obsession with God, and I mean, I mean, it's weird because I don't really care much for Spock's brother. There's nothing that really makes me care for the character. I mean, it is funny when the Kirk and McCoy find out that this guy is Spock's half brother, and Spock's like, "Well, you didn't ask," and he just says that. It's like, "Is that it? Is that it?" He's like, "Well, it wasn't essential information, Captain." So is that it?
Is that, yeah, I know.
He's just taking my bloody ship, and he just brainwashed all my crew. And now you're telling me this.
Now you're telling me, yeah, exactly. I liked. What did you think? Yeah, like the whole brainwashing, like him taking away people's pain and everything. Like, what did you like? That was. It was funny because he like took over everybody in the camp, because the movie begins on Nimbus 3. It's like a wasteland of a planet. And it's like a place where, like, there's a non-aggression treaty or something between the Federation, the Romulans, and the Klingons. So all three live kind of together in a type of peace. It's like, I forget what they call it. I don't know if it's supposed to be like a peace corps, or I forget what they compared that to. But it was just like it was just like they're like trying to do like a peace agreement. Nobody takes the Klingon dude, General Cord. Nobody takes him seriously. And he's just kind of there. He's just like, he's drunk all the time. And you have David Warner's actually in this movie. Great actor, David Warner. Let's just say this is not his best role, his most notable role. Star Trek 6. He has a much more notable role. I'm sure you know who I'm talking about. Yeah. Here with who was originally supposed to play Cybok?
No.
Well, the name of the place, he figured out that there's a plant that can connect them to paradise, and the Vulcans called paradise Shakari. Does that sound like a familiar name, Shakari?
Oh yes. Sean Connery.
Yeah, Sean Connery was what they originally wanted. Sean Connery to play Cybok, but he was not available because George Lucas and Steven Spielberg got to him first, and he played Indy's dad in Last Crusade. So they couldn't get Sean Connery, so they got Lawrence Luckinbill, who was Lucille Ball's son-in-law. Her daughter Lucy was married to him. So that's who the actor. So the actor actually is part of kind of this Star Trek royalty, because as we know, Lucille Ball, I Love Lucy, she was in charge of Desilu Studios, and Desilu Studios is what helped make Star Trek. They did Star Trek, and they also made Mission Impossible, which came out at the exact same time. So there is a connection there to there is a connection to Star Trek. So I think Lawrence Luckinbill did a really good job. He was actually one of the highlights of the movie, compared to like some of the designs and some of the situations were batshit crazy. Remember Kirk goes into the room, into the bar or something. He gets tackled by this cat lady, and then you hear the dub, and it's just so batshit crazy. The dub, or the sound the cat lady makes. You remember what I'm talking about? Yeah. And then he just throws her into the pool or something, or the fountain or whatever.
Yeah,
that was that was something I remember, because I saw that a long time ago as a kid. The sound still grates on my nerves that they used for that segment. And then the other thing that they had that was unique to this movie that I remember quite a bit as a kid was Spock had these rocket boots.
Yeah, those, yeah.
So he used that to save Kirk when Kirk falls off of El Capitan in the beginning of the movie. And actually, what's funny is it's because Spock was distracting Kirk that Kirk fell in the first place. So Spock had to save him anyways. But like they have those boots, and they're being pursued by Cybok and the entire crew. Sulu was already taken over. Uhura like gets all sexy and sexual, and apparently her and Scotty have a relationship in this movie, which I think kind of comes out of nowhere. But hey, whatever. And like she's like pinning Scotty down in this new state, and she's like and Scotty's like, I don't think I'm strong enough for what you want right now. And then there was a dumb moment. Maybe remember the moment I showed this in my trailer that I created because it was funny. He just literally walks into the bulkhead and knocks himself out.
Yes.
Which I think was a little too degrading for Scotty, especially how he was built up in the original series and in the previous 4 films and everything. I thought it was a little kind of degrading. I mean, it was stupid, and it was just stupid.
Because even though Kirk, the Enterprise is Kirk's love, if you will, but it is very much, in a way, some would say it's Scotty's ship. Out of everyone, it's Scotty's ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's usually what people say. So yeah, to see him being sort of defeated by his own ship in a way, that is kind of a bit. Yeah, it's a bit sort of man.
Yeah. So I saw that, and I was just like, I guess they're trying to recreate some humor from 4, but it's just not really working. Like, I don't even laugh at it. I just think it's stupid. That's why I included it in the trailer in the first place. But it was, but like they escape. Oh yeah, they hear Morse code. So they're in the brig. Kirk, Spock, and McCoy are in the brig, and then they hear Morse code, and then they're like they're trying to decipher it, and they're like STEPBAC. Step back, and then the wall explodes, and then Sky's like, "What the hell? Don't you understand English or something?" It was ridiculous like that. But I mean, it was moments like the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy. Like, it was stuff that was a funny scene though. I thought that was
yeah.
Good. Or stand back or whatever. So whatever. But then they're in the shaft, and then they're being pursued, and then all 3 of them have to hold on to Spock, and Spock is like Spock hits like the rocket pusher. They shoot up all the way to the. They shoot up all the way to the ceiling of the shaft, and it's just like, because they're like the boots are not strong enough, and there's like somebody put on some weight, or it's not able to hold all of us. So yeah, so like they get to the top. There's like an old rotor wheel or something for the that classic ship would use. They go into that room, and then they have their little thing. They get caught up by Cybok, and Cybok starts going through the pain of McCoy and Spock. I was curious what you thought of that, especially with McCoy. We'll start with McCoy.
Yeah, with McCoy, it adds a lot of backstory to his character and why he, is the person that he is, and why he pursued, his medical field, and why he ran off with the Enterprise. It was very good. It was done organically. It made sense. It wasn't something that was just thrown up in exposition for no reason. It played in with the story, and laying down all your grief and suffering to sort of come together, and again with the main trio coming together. I thought that was amazing, and it was heartbreaking. It does escape my mind what they showed for Spock. I don't really remember what they.
He sees his birth. He sees his birth, and he sees his father, and his father's just like looks at the infant kind of dismissively and says, "So human,"
I love the fact that when Spock's half brother walks off and he's going to go to the bridge, and he says like, "Come, Spock." Spock's like, "No, I've come to terms with that." And I thought that was a great, powerful character moment.
I agree. That was great. And then of course McCoy feels the same way. I mean, like, especially we learned quite a bit about him and his father, and like how he tried to save his father's life. His father's just like, "Let me go." And then like the week later, like they found a cure for the disease, and he already let him
that's
go.
gotta hurt.
That was just like, yeah. And then, yeah, we got to, that was some of DeForest Kelly's, some of his best acting was in this movie. And then of course we get Kirk, and Kirk's like, I need my pain. I need my pain. What do you think drives us? You know, his pain. So yeah, so Kirk needs his pain, and then they get across the Great Barrier, not the Great Barrier, the or I don't know if they call it the Great Barrier. There's the Galactic Barrier, and then there's the Great Barrier, which encompasses the center of the galaxy. And the center of the galaxy is where Shakari is supposed to be. So they managed to get through the Great Barrier. They get to this blue moon, not the beer. They get to this blue moon or planet or whatever. That is, which is pretty much just more Planet California. I'm assuming it was Vasquez Rocks where they filmed Arena and, you know, a few other episodes. And they encounter God. No, wasn't God. Just some blue asshole incorporeal being that wants to get off the planet. It is trapped there and wants to use the ship. And of course, we get the famous line. What does Kirk ask the entity?
Why does God need a starship?
What does God? What I asked? I said, what does God need with a starship? You know, and it just then you know then you find out the entity's true intentions are not quite so honorable, and they start shooting lightning out of his eyes because he's a bad
False being.
False being, a bad evil incorporeal being and everything. I think they kill it with photon torpedoes. Actually, I think Spock is in command of the Klingon ship, so they're being pursued by a Klingon ship. There's this one young Klingon commander that wants to make a name for himself by taking out Kirk, and so part of the tension with getting them back to the Enterprise on the shuttlecraft while they're being held by Cybok, and then the ship's being taken over, is that they're also being targeted by this Klingon ship. And I forget, I think his name's Commander Claw or something. And they're about to shoot on them. They're about to shoot missiles on them. But you get this terrible effect where you see the Enterprise go off into warp and just went zoop like that. And it looked awful. You know what I'm talking about? That moment? Yeah. So the Klingons, so Spock manages to get General Cord to take command of the Klingon ship, and then they save Kirk by blasting the entity with phasers or torpedoes or whatever, and then they get the hell. I think they leave, and that's it. And then, of course, maybe man was not meant for paradise. Is God really out there? And then Kirk's like, oh no, God's probably up in here, in all beings and everything. And I think that's pretty much how Star Trek V ended. Kind of a. And he follows up with having the Enterprise A, but that's pretty much it. And Harv Bennett, Harv Bennett himself was in the movie. He was the admiral in the beginning of the movie. If you don't know, Harv Bennett he produced Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home, and
that's pretty fitting then.
Yeah. So like the idea of Wrath of Khan came from him. They said we're going to bring back a character, we're going to bring back Khan, and then history was made. So yeah, 5 was the last movie that they did with Harv Bennett. Harv Bennett was out after that, so 5 did not do good in the box office at all.
I can imagine.
And because it didn't do good in the box office, the future of the movie series was called into question. But it made so much money. The earlier films did so well that they decided, we're going to make one more film featuring the original crew. And a lot of ideas were pitched. One was one where they wanted to do Starfleet Academy. That was Harv Bennett's pitch. That didn't go through, so he was out. And then you had, I think Walter Koenig had a pitch, where the Enterprise crew was killed by aliens. That obviously didn't go through. And then Nimoy came up with a pitch. And the pitch was, what if the wall came down in outer space? So I'm sure you know your history. The Berlin Wall came down in 1989, and and because of that, everybody kind of knew at that point that the Soviet Union was kind of coming to an end. Maybe people didn't. Maybe people knew that. Maybe people didn't, because I know the Soviet Union collapsed literally around the same time Undiscovered Country came out. like literally the same month. It was like December of 1991. So, so the question was, what if the wall came down in outer space? Whereas the Klingons were the Russians, and the Federation were, well, Americans. So you have a Chernobyl-like event that pretty much sets up Star Trek VI, which is the destruction or the explosion on Praxis, a Klingon moon that orbits Kronos, the Klingon homeworld.
Yeah.
And because of that, that was like their key energy facility. And they now don't have the means to wage war less, or do anything. And this, because of that, the chancellor of the Klingon Council decides to go with peace talks, and that's where Star Trek VI begins. So I was curious what your thoughts on Star Trek VI is.
I thought Star Trek VI was a good ending to the original run. I would say it is. So, of course, my ranking goes Wrath of Khan and Search for Spock are kind of interchangeable for me. And then I have The Voyage Home, and then I would say Undiscovered Country comes after that.
Okay.
This film, I thought, again, it was a good blend of, putting the characters to use through their intelligence rather than just all-out violence. Of course, the purpose of it is to prevent an all-out war from occurring. And I thought it worked well. The mystery that was set up of who actually fired the I don't exactly know what they are. They're probably the torpedoes at the
photon torpedoes.
Yeah, the photon torpedoes at the Klingon ship.
Yeah, Kronos 1.
Yeah, and I think the mystery surrounding that was kind of cut a bit short, because once you hear the recording when McCoy and Kirk are put to trial, you kind of already know who it is, but it still kind of gets, they still kind of carry it on for a long, long time. So I feel like that's kind of a bit, dumb there. But I did like the idea of this big prison where all the people are sort of dumped, and it's a massive it's a massive hellhole. It's literal torture, and if you don't die in there with all the fighting and all the brawling, then you're gonna die from all the hypothermia when you get kicked outside. And that's just absolutely brutal, and you just get to see Kirk and McCoy just robbed of all their strength and just be thrown into this pit, and it's awful, and they have to rely on Spock and the rest of them to uncover this. But of course, they have faith in Spock because they've come to grow so much together. So obviously Spock is the one that has to figure all this out. I thought it was a good send off. I liked the idea of Kirk having to overcome some of his faults as a person. I love the scene at dinner where they're quoting different people from like history and books, and I don't remember exactly what the guy says, but then Kirk goes like Hitler 1939 or something.
Yeah, General Chang is like, we need breathing room, and then Kirk is like, Earth, Hitler 1938. He's like, I beg your pardon. And then they talk about the undiscovered country, the future. And of course, the one that I love the most is you haven't truly heard Shakespeare until you've heard it in the original Klingon, and that came straight from Chancellor Gorkon, played by David Warner. And I thought his performance as Gorkon was great, and I didn't realize this as a kid, and I probably wouldn't have picked up on this, but if you really look at Gorkon, you would know right away that he was about to be assassinated. Do you know why?
What was that?
Do you know what political leader he kind of resembles with the beard, without the mustache, but with the beard? American president, to be exact.
No.
Abe Lincoln. Kind of resembles Abe Lincoln.
Right.
And you know what happens to Abe Lincoln, right?
Yeah.
Gets shot in the head. So Gorkon gets assassinated because he wanted to do peace talks. And what's funny is a few years later in in the 90s, something similar happened. I brought this up in what I made a video talking about these 6 films. And when I got to Star Trek 6, like as funny as that, this kind of foreshadows. There was this was I'm sure you're familiar with Israel, right? And all their history of violence, Palestinians, Egypt, and all the countries that they're surrounded by. Well, in the 70s, you had the Camp David Accords, which was President Jimmy Carter. Carter was president, and then you have Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin, and you have Egyptian President Anwar Sadat making peace accords that year. And then a few years later, the Egyptian President Sadat gets assassinated. Yeah, same by his own people, a coup. A lot of people didn't like the idea of him, making peace with Israel. And then, those fighting continued. 90s, 90s, he had the PLO and Palestinian Liberation Organization, led by Yasser Arafat. And then he had the current prime minister, 90s Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Yitzhak Rabin gets assassinated by his own people for doing a similar Oslo Accords a couple years earlier. So you have that. You have these accords happening with between two people. I forget if the U.S. was involved in the accords. I'm not sure. Like the Camp David one, obviously, because Camp David is in the United States, the president's retreat. But that being said, you have two parties that want to have peace, and there's interests on each side that don't want the peace, that want to continue the fighting, and that's something that Star Trek 6 really kind of does that, because Star Trek 6 has its own accords. You have the Khitomer Accords, and then you have people on both sides, the Federation and the Klingons. This is not just a Klingon thing. This is also a Federation thing. It's a vast conspiracy of people that don't want to have peace, that people want to continue the fighting for personal gain or for hatred, who knows. And It was very, very relevant to what was going on during that era, during that moment in history in the 20th century. I'm not even sure if you knew all this, but this is just stuff.
No, this is all new to me. It's interesting.
Yeah. So if you ever look up Camp David Accords or the Oslo Accords, and you'll learn quite a bit about that and the consequences of that. So it was, I mean, I love the political aspect of Star Trek 6. Like there was a lot of it. There was a lot. It still didn't take you out. Like it was pretty relevant, and it was written well enough that it doesn't take you out. You don't quite think about the things as much. Like nowadays, like you hear about let's just say you hear about a certain political leader who I won't name for reasons, and you write stories or situations based on what that political leader has done. Everybody's going to know who you're talking about, and then it takes people out of the story. They did something like that with the latest Orville, which took a lot of people out of the story. The season 3, talking about the issue of populism and everything. So I don't want to go deep into that, but it was still a good. Orville season 3 was still a pretty good season, regardless of some things that I feel that they should have done better and make a little bit less on the nose. But that's just a criticism I have. But what do you think of the court proceedings, the Klingon court? What do you think of that? I thought that looked pretty cool.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool how you had all of the Klingons in the sort of audience, and then you have all the spotlight on Kirk and McCoy, and it's done in a way where it's not really a fair court, as you can imagine. It's a Klingon court. They kind of have their own agenda. They kind of want Kirk and McCoy to be guilty. They're not offering them any time for to give their own reasons or anything like that. But as I say, the one thing that did take me out of it was when they showed when they played the recording of Kirk saying like, "Oh, I hate the Klingons. I want them destroyed. Like they killed my son." Then I know instantly who it is because, of course, the I forget her name, but the Vulcan woman was standing outside of his quarters when he said that.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, she was recording his. She was recording him saying that, and that's how Chang and the prosecution got that recording in the first place. So yeah, it was just. I one thing I thought Star Trek Six did really well is that it continued the trilogy.
Yeah,
like especially the thing with David. And what's kind of tragic when you think about it is this was 1990. This was like I think they filmed this in late 1990 or early 1991, and the actor that played David, Merritt Buttrick, passed away.
Oh God.
Yeah, he passed away. He was. You saw him in Next Generation. He was in the episode Symbiosis. He was the episode about addiction. He had the two different. You had the addicts, and then you had the suppliers.
Oh yes.
And what's funny is the one supplier dude was Judson Scott, who played Joaquin, Khan's second in command in Wrath of Khan. That was him. So you had two Wrath of Khan actors in that same episode. And what's funny was he was sick. He had AIDS. He got AIDS. There's a big AIDS epidemic of the late 80s, early 90s. He was unfortunately a victim of that. So he passed away in 89. And so when they show the picture, the portrait of him that Kirk has, I mean, that was I think that was Nicholas Meyer's way of honoring the actor.
Yeah.
For that. So because he Nicholas Meyer casted him as David in the Wrath of Khan, and so I thought it was a beautiful way to pay tribute to the character and of the consequences of what the Klingons did to Kirk, and of how Kirk truly feels about what happened, which we didn't really get to see much in 4 and 5. So I thought 6 did that pretty well, and we got to see Kirk go through a little arc. And that he ultimately, the last thing he said, I think one of the final things he says is, "You've restored my faith in my father." Azadbur says that about Gorkon, and then he says to her, "You restored my faith, my faith in my son, or my son's faith," or something like that. So,
yeah,
I love
the scene where Kirk runs into the briefing where they're having the peace talks and the leader's going to be assassinated, and he sort of runs, he grabs him, puts him to the floor, and he's like, "Hello, Kirk, Starship Enterprise." Like, that is funny.
And then they brought back Admiral Cartwright, who was in Star Trek 4, Brock Peters' character. They brought him back in Star Trek 6. Now he's the bad guy, and he's like, "Arrest those men!" And then Spock, Leonard Nimoy, screams out, "Arrest yourself!" And then he looks at Spock, and he has Valeris with him. He's like. And then Admiral Carly's like, "Oh, I'm screwed."
I also love the scene on the bridge where they find out the Vulcan woman is the one who has orchestrated all of this, and then Spock goes up and she grabs a phaser, and Spock goes up to her and he slaps it out of her hands, and he just looks very menacing in that moment.
Yes, that he was. Yeah, he was. I was scared for her. I was scared for her in that scene. Like he was like, "You're gonna have." He's like, he's just like, you're gonna have to shoot," because they laid a trap for her. They laid a trap by, once again, they exaggerate the condition of the conspirators. So the conspirators, they found the conspirators dead. They found the 2 guys that had the gravity boots that they used to kill Gorkon on Kronos 1. And so they pretended, or they made a false report saying that, alerting the crew that the 2 men are still alive. And then Valeris was going to go and finish the job, but instead of them being in bed, Kirk and Spock were in the beds instead. And Spock turns on the line. He's like, "You're going to have to shoot." And then then she's like, "I don't want to."
Yeah.
And then he smacks the thing out of her hand, and then he does this crazy, he gets into gray territory here where he's forcibly using the mind meld on her. I mean, they have no choice. They have time is of the essence. They have to do it, or there could be another war, and there could be another assassination. So they have very little time. So he is literally like she's resisting, and he's like really pushing into her. It's almost like mind, a word that rhymes with drape, I'll say. It's really messed up. And then she is screaming and moaning, and it's just like I'm just like whoa. I first see this, I'm like whoa, it's not messed up. It's messed up.
Yeah, that was a very disturbing scene. Yeah, but of course they have to do what's necessary because if although this may seem bad, if they let happen, what's going to happen, then all hell's going to break loose, literally.
That's true. That's true. So they had to do that, and they had to. What did you think of? What did you think of the fight? So you had Iman play a shapeshifter in that movie, and I don't know if she was married to David Bowie yet, or she was about to be married to David Bowie. But what do you think of that little fight between Kirk and another doppelganger? Surprise! And then headbutts McCoy, and then they like shoot him. He's the one. No, shoot him, not me, you idiot. Him, and then they shoot the real one. I thought that was.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I forgot about that. Yeah, that was a very fun scene.
So yeah, like this movie had its moments. I'll say that.
It did.
I'm trying to think. Did we not? What did we not talk about? Oh yeah, the what do you think of? Oh, did I tell you that there's another scene that I always like to talk about. When they're being questioned by Chang in the courts, there's a point where he's asking Kirk a question, and then Chang is just like, "Don't even wait for the translation. Answer me now." And that is actually a quote from Ambassador Adlai Stevenson, who was ambassador to the UN during the Cuban Missile Crisis. So when they're having their talks with the Soviet ambassador, that's exactly what Adlai Stevenson says to the Soviet ambassador. It's like, don't wait for the translation. Answer me now. About them putting missiles in Cuba and all that. I'm sure you know all about the Cuban Missile Crisis because you learned about everybody. We all learned about that. So, but yeah, that was another fun thing from history that I learned that they kind of drew from.
Well, no, I'm actually learning a lot about history from this stream here because I know in a lot of American schools they teach like primarily American history, whereas in the UK we learn a bit about every country. We don't really primarily focus. So yeah, I'm finding out a lot.
That's the issue I have with American education. So I mean, like, there's things I feel like I should know more about that I don't. Like especially it wasn't really until high school that we learned more about like Africa and Asia and all the other the history of all the other countries. We didn't really learn quite about that in grade school. So
yeah. Yeah, so yeah, but I'm learning a lot of things here, so yeah.
Great. I mean, yeah, it's that just tells you how smart the writers were when they were putting the stuff together, and fans appreciate that. And I wish it had that same level of thought and insight that now that they did back then, which is one of the reasons why I'm so critical. I mean, people call me nitpicker, but it's just I'm so critical of the newer stuff because it depends too much on what came before, and it doesn't even do a good job of just telling a unique story. Story that gets you to relate to the characters, that gets you to like the characters more. I mean, people are saying that it's the case with this new season of Picard, but I don't know. I've seen better television than that, and I mean, I'm being honest, Star Trek is. Original series, Next Generation, Deep Space Nine are some of the best television you're ever going to see. Best science fiction, best television. So, and Voyager and Enterprise have their issues, but they still follow the Star Trek. They still follow the Star. They still feel like Star Trek. They still follow the Star Trek. What Star Trek is, to a degree. So
that's why I'm happy that I've still got so much unexplored Star Trek content for me to watch. This is my first time going through this franchise, so to know that I've got a lot of good stuff ahead of me in a time where we haven't really got a lot of good entertainment.
Wait until you get to Deep Space Nine. So that show, that show really started serialization. I mean, it's still episodic, but there's it continues the arcs, seasonal arcs that character arcs that Next Generation started. Well, you're on season 2. It's really TNG really starts to shine in season 3. They have a completely new writing team, and they start having arcs. Like they'll have an episode that establishes something, and then they'll follow up either later in the season or they'll follow up the following season. One episode in particular that I won't that I will name, but I won't say what it's about. It's an episode called "Sins of the Father" in season 3, and let's just say that begins a whole arc for the character of Worf. And it's a great episode. Ends on a certain way that requires a follow up, and they do follow it up the following season. And they follow that. Then they follow that episode up with something else. So there's consequences in mind with shows like that. DS9 continues that, but then they actually started doing serialized. They did 2 serialized arcs later in the series, which the reason why I'm so critical of New Trek is because they try to do the serialization format because, shows like Game of Thrones and all the HBO shows like The Sopranos got so popular, and they've become pretty much the gold standard for writing, serialization now. Well, those the new Trek shows, they, instead of writing, having so many things going on, they have very few things going on, and then they pad it with they pad it with moments that just don't kind of take away from the pacing, and moments that just don't feel earned as much. Whereas you have the finale of Deep Space Nine, where there's so many things going on, there's so many points, there's so many things that have to be done in order to resolve everything. Whereas I feel very little is happening in these newer shows, and there's very little in terms of world building. Which, one thing I loved about the Star Trek shows before was that there was a lot of world building. You bring in a new character, an episode, or a new or a new ship or something, and then they would drive the story forward. Or there always felt like the world was bigger than it is.
Yeah.
So, but that's just me ranting about New Trek. I don't want to do that here. So, but yeah, that's pretty much Star Trek 6. We get the great Klingon, get the great Chang fight at the end with the prototype. So the prototype was actually beneath the Enterprise, and that was the one that was shooting the torpedoes in the end, I believe. And Chang was in command of it. And what do you think of all the things that Chang was saying during the fight? All the Shakespeare.
Yeah, I do. Yeah, I did find that interesting. I do like it when these characters take these quotes that are well known and from literature, and they totally put a new meaning on top of them, make them even more menacing.
What I love about Chang, and what I love about the Klingons in Star Trek 6, it's just like, why would the Klingons know about Shakespeare? Well, I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, I don't know if this is in the Art of War, but one thing I do believe that it does say is that you should know thine enemy, like very well. Kind of like, if you've seen Star Wars, right, with Thrawn knows his enemy by reviewing their artwork, see what kind of people they are. And well, Shakespeare is, I mean, they say in Next Generation, well, actually, you haven't gotten that far yet, but if you want to understand the human condition, you need to really familiarize yourself with Shakespeare. So that's why I think they bring up Shakespeare during that thing. The Klingons are like, we know your capabilities, we know what kind of species you are, we know we know quite a bit about you, because, like, once again, they still see them as the enemy, and that's why they're quoting Shakespeare to each other. That's why they're talking Shakespeare. So which is something I can believe. I mean, I know people would agree with me on that, but I think I could believe that. I believe that. And then, of course, Chang is kind of flaunting Shakespeare quotes all over the place. Cry havoc, or let's slip the dogs of war. And then, of course, you have McCoy saying, I forget what line he says, but McCoy's like, I give someone any money to have him shut up. So, and then, of course, they figure out how to track the they figure out how to track the ship, because there's no way they can sense them, because it has that advanced cloaking technology, and they fix the problem because ships never can fire when cloaked, but this one can. So they figured out that in order to track the ship, they have to figure out where they figure out that those the energy used creates ionized gas, and ionized gas has to have a tailpipe. And so Spock figures that out. Spock realizes that thanks to Uhura, and then they modify a torpedo to sense the ionized gas, and then of course that's how they destroy the prototype. And then Chang is just like, Chang is he's ready to embrace death. He's like, to be or not to be, and then of course,
yeah.
And that's Star Trek 6, and I loved it. And then of course I love the ending monologue. The ending monologue that Kirk has at the end, and where he literally references the Next Generation crew, because it's like, we're about to end. We're at the end of an era, but there's going to be another ship with another crew that's going to continue the voyages we've begun and everything. And I thought that was the perfect send off to go into Star Trek 6. But fortunately, a movie called Star Trek Generations exists. I'm assuming you haven't watched that one yet, right?
But I know what happens. I know a big thing that happens.
Okay, all right. So So don't watch that one yet until after you see all of Next Generation.
Yeah.
And then we'll talk about that, because I think it kind of undoes some of the stuff that Star Trek 6 did. And a lot of people had that issue. Heck, even the showrunner of Picard season 3 had an issue with what they did in Generations. That's why there's a moment where a particular member Barry appears in a particular episode of this current season that I won't get into for your sake. So, but yeah, so I really enjoy talking about your journey so far. I can't wait to see. Can't wait to find out what, you're getting closer to really good episodes. Did you already watch Measure of Man yet? Season 2 of TNG?
Yes, I think that's the one where they talk about Data and his rights and how he is a living being, although he may be an android. I like that one. So he
is an android. It's just is he the prophet? Is he his own? Is he his own individual? Does he have rights, or is he property of Starfleet?
Yeah, but it's a big debate of what constitutes his life, and it's self-consciousness. Well, Data has that, and it's intelligence. Well, he has that as well, and I did like that, and the monologue that Picard gives at the end of Starfleet tells us that our mission is to go out there to explore new life and new civilizations.
Well, it is.
Yeah, well, there it is.
That was a great performance by Patrick Stewart right there. And it like a lot of people, you're going to hear this from a lot of people that say this was really that episode was truly the first really good classic TNG episode.
Although I will say here, and I mean, I'll just give my brief thoughts on the Next Generation, just quickly. So I did find it got off to a bit of a rocky start, and that's what I've heard from a lot of people. They say season 3 is where it really kicks off. However, I have found a few episodes that I think are just perfect in my opinion, and those episodes are the ones that are centered around the holodeck. I love the concept of the holodeck, and I love I actually have a list here of, because when I watch these episodes I always rank them just to keep track of which ones I like. And
okay,
so okay, I just have to pull it up. So yeah, the episodes on the holodeck I just find to be absolutely amazing. And if I could pick any one piece of technology from the Star Trek universe to have here, I'd probably pick a holodeck, because it just seems so fun. And so the episodes that I've loved so far are The Big Goodbye. That's my favorite one so far.
Okay, that's the one where he's where Picard is he's Dixon Hill. He's basically a private eye, so kind of like your Marlowe, Philip Marlowe character, your Sam Spade type of private eye from the 40s, film noir and everything. Okay, yeah, that plays a really good role. That's a good episode.
So an episode like The Big Goodbye, or Elementary Dear Data, or Data Law.
Yeah, Elementary Dear Data. Let's just say a certain character reappears in Picard.
I have heard about that. Yeah.
Yeah, and the same actor too, Daniel Davis. So Professor Moriarty, well, let's just say you haven't seen the last of Professor Moriarty.
Oh,
In
and
this
what I
area,
will
in
say though
TNG.
is watching Star Trek: The Next Generation, I do love the main cast in that. Of course, Jonathan Frakes is a actor that I've seen a lot of when I was growing up, because when I was growing up, I used to watch reruns of Beyond Belief, Fact or Fiction, and I absolutely loved that show. And Jonathan Frakes did that, so I was well aware of Jonathan Frakes. And but I mean, as I said many times during this stream, the relationship between Kirk, Spock, and McCoy is one that I don't think we're ever going to see again. I think it's just absolutely perfect. So when I do watch The Next Generation, it does feel like something's missing there, in a way.
So you think the Kirk, Spock, and McCoy thing's like lightning in a bottle
Yeah.
type deal?
Yeah.
All right. Because I like that there's good chemistry in the Next Generation crew. Like you get some good chemistry between Riker and Worf. You get some good chemistry between Picard and Riker, Picard and Beverly, Geordi and Data, maybe Riker and Troy. I think Troy. The Troy episodes are the weakest, in my opinion. Episodes focusing on Deanna Troy. So yeah, you haven't gotten to Q Who, right?
No, although I have had a few episodes with the Q so far.
Yeah, there's Farpoint, which was the premiere, so you got Q there, and then you had Hide and Q, where they ask Riker to join, where Q asked Riker to join the Continuum. So Farpoint's okay, not the best.
No.
Very very interesting, introduction for Picard. He's kind of starts off as kind of a little unlikable at first. But yeah. I like how his character grows throughout the series.
I haven't found Wesley Crusher to be as annoying as some people have said.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people didn't like the fact that Wesley was always saving the day, or
yeah. I did love the scene where I think it's Data Law, where Wesley's trying to tell everyone, guys, this isn't Data, and then he stands up and Picard goes, "Shut up, Wesley."
Yeah, that's where "Shut Up, Wesley" comes from. So, yeah, and then it was great. That was great. So, yeah, I actually enjoyed Data Lore, and I'll say that this lore may or may not be in this new Picard series. Excuse me, I didn't say anything.
Well, I mean, Lore's definitely been on Twitter in the past few days.
Yeah, that's true. That's very true. So, but we also I'm trying to think. You're at the Icarus factor, so all right. So season 2.
I saw.
What do you think of Dr. Pulaski?
Dr. Pulaski. I mean, I have no problem with her. Of course, I prefer Beverly Crusher. I think she's a superior character, but Dr. Pulaski isn't that bad, I wouldn't say. I've certainly the past few episodes I've watched, her relationship with Picard is continuing to grow, because at first they didn't really like each other. They're two sort of minds clashing, but they're sort of growing more accepting of each other.
Yeah, they're both older, they're both experienced, they both do things their way. Pulaski starts off as she's older than Beverly Crusher. She does things her own way. And the thing was, I think the showrunner of season 1, his name is Maurice Hurley, didn't like Gates McFadden's performance. Gates McFadden, Beverly Crusher.
Yeah.
So they fired her. So like in the series, she's like, oh, she went to Starfleet Medical or something. But the actress got fired. So, and they brought in Diana Muldaur, and Diana Muldaur was already in Star Trek. I don't know if you recognize her, but she was in 2 episodes of the original series. She plays Dr. Mulhall in Return to Tomorrow, which is the one where they find these higher beings in these spherical receptacles, and then they create they try to create android bodies for them. And the one that takes over, and they take over for before they can use those android receptacles, they use Kirk, Spock, and her as receptacles. But let's just say the third character is more villainous and ends up trying to take over Spock permanently. So, she was in that episode, and then she was also in Is There in Truth No Beauty in season 3. That's the one with Ambassador Kolos and the ugly ambassador that lives in a little briefcase, and if you open it up and if any normal human being is in the room with that with an exposed case of that type of creature, they call them Medusans, they go insane. So only people that can be in the same room while wearing protective safety glasses, safety visor or safety, colored red safety glasses, is people, Vulcans, and her character, Dr. Miranda Jones. And she looks totally different. She wears a black wig in that one. And she has this little dress that shows that acts as sensors for her because she's blind. So she can't see the ambassador. That's her secret on how she doesn't go insane. And plus she has Vulcan discipline despite being human. So
yeah,
we didn't talk about those episodes, so I'm talking about them now earlier. So, but I don't know if you recognized her from those two episodes.
I didn't, but looking at pictures now, yeah, I should have.
So yeah, I didn't even know it then when I first saw Pulaski. I didn't realize she was in those two episodes because I didn't see those two episodes for years. So, but yeah, so yeah, I like Pulaski for the most part. She was supposed to be that was their way of making a character more like McCoy, because Beverly Crusher is nothing like McCoy. So they wanted to have a cantankerous, type of character in the doctor role, and it just didn't quite work out. And they do bring Beverly Crusher back. I'm sure you know that though.
Yeah.
So, but that's pretty much early TNG. Some people hate the first two seasons of TNG. I don't hate them, but there are some episodes that are really like you look at and you're like 80s. Like you see 80s, just 80s there and 80s there. So, and some of it's bad. Like there's an episode called Justice about half naked people, and on this planet they're like kids, and there's a god that watches over them in orbit. There's that one, and then there's the episode where they land on the planet full of women. The women, so the men are the subservient sex, and the women are the dominant sex on that world. And then you have a bunch of Federation people that they're trying to extract. And let's just be honest, not a whole lot happens in that episode. And the people that are being anarchists, the dude has like this 80s hair that's just like you think he's in the band Whitesnake or something, or he's in a hair metal band or something. It's crazy. So there you have it. You have these episodes, and it's just like they're cheesy, but they're still they're still rewatchable. Like you can get something out of these episodes.
Yeah.
I wish I could say the same for newer Trek. So when people say the newer season of Picard's better than these seasons, I disagree wholeheartedly. So, but yeah, that's pretty much it. So yeah, so we're all caught up now. You're really enjoying your journey. You're gonna keep watching. You're gonna watch all the shows.
Definitely. I always watch one thing at a time. So this, until I reach the end, the absolute end, is what I'm going to be watching every day. So
it gets to a point where because the 90s was like Star Trek at its highest point. So there's a point where two series take place chronologically, parallel to each other. So like season 6 of TNG is parallel chronologically to DS9 season 1, and then it keeps going. Season 7, and then of TNG, and then season 2 of DS9, and then season 3 of DS9 was season 1 of Voyager, and then you keep going. I'm curious if are you going to watch one series at a time? You're going to just like watch one season at a time and kind of juggle it to get a good chronological world building view or something.
What would you recommend? Is there going to be any plot points that I need to watch both at the same time?
I was showing DS9 and Voyager to my friend. My friend actually watched I think them season by season. So he watched season 1 of he started watching DS9 seasons 1 and 2, and then he started watching season 3, and then he started watching Voyager season 1, and they kind of went back and forth with them. So it's really up to you. But I would say watch all TNG first.
Okay.
I mean, there is a crossover in TNG where they go to DS9 and they encounter the Doctor from DS9 in an episode of season 6. So, well, you know what? Now that I think about it, there are episodes of TNG that follow up episodes of DS9, and there are episodes of DS9 that follow up episodes of TNG.
Okay.
So I would suggest, I would suggest once you get to season 6 of TNG, then maybe start watching DS9 season 1, and then TNG season 7. That's a tough one. That's a really tough one because there's an episode called The Maquis in season 2 of DS9, and then they follow that up with the same season. They follow that up at the very end of Next Generation. So it's a tough one. I'll have to really think about that.
Yeah, I'll probably watch them in the order they were aired. So I probably will switch back and forth between them. I'm fine with doing that.
Yeah,
no trouble.
So, but hey, man, I'm glad that you're enjoying this. I'd love to have I'm trying to get more people to watch Star Trek. Especially the older stuff that really has made an impact on pop culture, has made an impact on entertainment, and is iconic. Like everybody knows. I mean, even people that have never watched Star Trek know Star Trek. Like they know of it. They know someone that's watched it, or it's been shown in other parts of the culture, like Simpsons. You see a lot of Star Trek references. Futurama. Like I know people that watch Futurama that have never watched Star Trek. I don't know how that is, but that is. And so much other stuff. So it's really there, and I think it's something I think everybody should see at least once. That's just me.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but any final thoughts on all that we talked about? And we've been at this for 3.5 hours.
Well, no, I've absolutely enjoyed this journey. Of course, I started watching Star Trek, and I didn't know I was going to be this, into it as much as I am. And I mean, I would say that nothing has topped the first season of the original series for me. That will always be just my favorite, I think.
Mine too.
But yeah, I'm absolutely loving everything. There's always something different with Star Trek. It always gets me thinking. I'm never bored. I'm never sitting there thinking, "Oh, when's this going to end?" The show brings me into it. It isn't just showing me something. It's I'm a part of it in some way, because every episode, and we've done this in previous streams, where certain episodes end and it's left up to interpretation. Is, what do you think about it? Well, this person thinks differently about it, but that's the point of it.
Roman's awesome. He does a lot of stuff, but yeah, I'm just surprised. Like you very rarely hear anybody say DS9 is, some people saying, I know some people don't. And DS9 had there was a little bit of backlash because of how different that was, because it wasn't on a starship. But oh my God, DS9, as the seasons go on, it gets so crazy. Like you're on, like, there's a moment where I was literally like sitting on the edge of my seat watching what was going to happen. Like I was like, how are they going to get out of this? What is going to happen? Like it's just it's so good. It is so good, that series. So I can't wait until you get to DS9, especially as the season progresses into a major event. I won't say what it is because, but that's I can't wait for you to watch that, and there the rest of Star Trek, and that's awesome, man. I'm glad we had the stream, and of course I didn't even realize it, but today's first contact day, something that was established in a movie that you haven't watched yet.
Well, I looked up on it when I heard people talk about it, and apparently it's the day in which humanity made contact with the Vulcans and a few other races.
That's right.
But it's 60 years from. Is it 60 years from now? Yeah.
No, 40 years. 40
years
now, actually.
Yeah, so it's 2063. Yeah. There we go.
So that's there's time travel. Let's just say there's time travel in that movie. So yeah, so don't worry, you'll be seeing it pretty shortly.
Well, I'm just gonna take a guess here, but I'm pretty sure it's gonna be in the movie Star Trek: First Contact.
Yep. How'd you guess?
Yeah, I know.
Don't answer that. So it was cool going through the movies. I love talking about the Star Trek movies. Like I could talk about those all day. I loved going through talking about the rest of the original series and continues. I do need to watch continues more. I mean, because like continues, in my opinion, I don't know how I'm curious. Like I feel continues' episodes were up there with season 1 of the original series.
Definitely.
In terms of quality, in terms of great storytelling, and I love the finale. Like I can't think of a better finale than if TOS had a series finale. I don't think they could top that.
Yeah.
So, my opinion.
No, I completely agree.
Oh, okay. But yeah, thanks for doing this, man. It's been a lot. It's been a blast talking about this with you, and I can't wait to can't wait to talk again more about TNG, especially once you get to season 3 of TNG. We'll really once you get through season 3, we'll do another talk. I'm gonna have to create a new series just for you now. New Star Trek viewer watching this. I can't. Because I've been doing this under my Trekporial label, which is just me having conversations with one other person talking about stuff. But then this has practically been a series in and of itself. So I'll have to come up with a name. So, but yeah, man. Well, once we get to season 3, I want to talk TNG seasons 1, 2, and 3, and the differences and what you're spotting and everything. And yeah, and then we'll go forward after that. So
absolutely.
Thanks for being here, man.
It's been a pleasure.
And so, you have anything you want to promote before we go? Anything you're doing?
Just if anyone's watching, can you please go subscribe to my YouTube channel. I am currently on a little break for 2 weeks, so I have a lot more time to upload more sort of long form content. I do want to do some video essays. Of course, that is my bread and butter. I have been doing a lot of sort of news type videos talking about just things going on in pop culture, but I do want to sit down and do a good old like 15-minute video talking about, I want to do Top Gun Maverick because I absolutely love that film, so I want to do a video essay on that, a few other films as well. I just really want to sit down and do a good old like 15-20 minute film analysis of a bunch of films that I love.
Nice, man. Hope so did you do your Wrath of Khan thing that you told me about?
What I was going to do is I was going to release that on William Shatner's birthday because I thought that'd be pretty fitting, but it was only a couple of days away, so I thought I don't want to rush it. I want to put a lot of thought into that. So I will get to writing a script on that. Initially, I was going to do sort of retrospective, but there is this one guy on YouTube, I think his name's called Oliver Harper, and he does really good Star Trek reviews. And so I thought if I was going to do a retrospective, it'd just be copying his. So I'll just do a review of it, but I'll go into detail. With that.
Yeah, you know what I do? Well, when I approach a retrospective, I don't watch other people's retrospectives. I just kind of work from the gut, and I've come up with I do things differently as a result. So, and I don't I combine my personal experiences with it, with facts and what went into the episode, and of course personal comparisons or my own insights into what's going on. And it's just something I have to improve myself. So, but yeah, definitely. I can't wait. When you do, you gotta let me know. I do want to watch it. If you do the Wrath of Khan one, so I want to do. I want to eventually do some Star Trek retrospectives myself, especially season 1. I want to do them season by season. So especially with the original series, because I've been reading books and on the history of the story of the episode, where the episode came from, the production and everything. And it's been really fun. I've been doing these series with Wakizashi's Tea House where we're talking about random Star Trek episodes, and I've been basically doing my research, trying to help kind of drive the conversation, talking a little bit about the plot, but a lot of what went into it and everything. So. And I want to incorporate that eventually into read up on all the episodes of season 1 and put a season 1 retrospective. If there's anything I want to do, it's a Star Trek season 1 retrospective.
Definitely.
Eventually. But season 1 I want to do pretty soon. So I'm currently working on a Metroid retrospective, the first Metroid game and its remake. So that's currently what I'm working on, is my little video essay. So that's what I'm doing now. And 2001 is going to be after that, and then after that, who knows? But that's what I'm doing. And of course, tomorrow is I'm doing my live watch of Picard season 3, episode 8. Will more questions be answered, or will more mystery box materialize in tomorrow's episode? Who knows? And then Friday we usually have our discussion, talking about the episode. So tomorrow's reaction, Friday is discussion.
Okay.
And Sunday I'll probably have a stream talking about the Mario movie because Mario, and I liked it. I really enjoyed it, by the way. So. So definitely seal of approval from Nerdporial. So, but that pretty much wraps it up. So thank you, sir, Golden Age Geek, for joining me. Everybody subscribe to him and check out his content. Watch his content. Hit a like button, and that way you stay subscribed. If you don't, they're gonna unsubscribe you. So, but everybody, thank you, and have a great rest of your evening, or in your case, night, because you're 6 hours ahead of me. So
yes.
So all right, everybody, have a good night, and I'll just show you the intro that I did and then the outro.
Bye, everyone. Bye.
At the edge of the universe, 400 men and women are probing the immeasurable blackness of space. Their leaders are an Earthman with no fear and a stranger with no heart. Travel beyond our time and solar system, into new galaxies, into worlds beyond your dreams. Star Trek, every week, in color on the NBC television network.
For those who remember, for those who will never forget, and for those who will experience the Star Trek adventure for the very first time. The Star Trek Hexology. Six timeless adventures that have changed Star Trek forever. Now, all 6 films remastered in glorious HD for the ultimate in sound and picture quality. This will be your last chance to own a physical copy of Star Trek. The Gene Roddenberry creation that launched the Star Trek franchise. The human adventure has just begun. For all generations. The original Star Trek films on sale one last time.